Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Proof is Out There. There are individuals who have devoted their lives to chasing down proof of UFOs. But as you're about to see, this pursuit of the unknown can be terrifying and potentially dangerous. It's August 2022 at Robert Moses State Park on Long Island in New York. Two UFO researchers, brothers Jerry and John Tedesco, are getting ready to film late at night with infrared cameras. Their footage shows two spherical objects appearing off in the distance. One of the brothers begins painting the UFO with a device which emits infrared lights. Moments later, there seems to be a response as a purple light flashes in and out, coming closer and closer to the shore.
Where's that come from, John?
Coming closer. Right here. Go back up.
The brothers panic and decide to flee.
Back up. Go, go!
You know, it was a kind of a flight or fight response. It came up on us so suddenly, and it was so huge.
Then, one of the brothers turns his infrared camera back towards the water and captures a remarkable arc of light. An electromagnetic interference appears to strike their cameras, and both brothers feel they can't use their legs.
I can't move. I can't get myself, away from the water's edge.
They recover after a few minutes and continue to record what are actually 3 points of infrared light, all invisible to the naked eye.
Two of the lights are stacked one on top of the other, and then the other light is off in the distance. So they're under the impression that what they're dealing with is potentially three craft or one larger craft with more points of light.
The lights soon disappear, but in the following days, the brothers say they experience swollen lymph nodes and extreme fatigue. Benaya says this is similar to what happened in May of 1951 to some Korean War soldiers after they allegedly saw a UFO.
They started to see this strange light moving down the mountainside towards this village, and they can hear their bullets pinging off of the exterior of this object. Shortly thereafter, they start to experience some bizarre symptoms, and basically they're treated for radiation sickness.
That was the end of the story for those soldiers. For the Tedesco brothers, however, it seems that whatever they encountered may have latched on. Months later, in the driveway next to John's house, a camera mounted on the RV they use on investigations captures footage of what may be the mysterious object's return.
Once these street lights went out, you see a growing blue source of light. It went from blue to white light, and the white light grew almost as though there was an object that was overhead, and once it had descended to a certain altitude, the streetlights came back on, and then this object had gone away.
The Tedesco brothers believe they experienced what is known as the hitchhiker effect, where people encounter a UFO that follows them home and makes them sick. So could we really be seeing multiple UFO sightings in these videos? We turn to our experts to find out. First, Dr. Ed Hope explores if radiation exposure may be behind the brothers' temporary leg paralysis.
Now, for radiation to stop you in your tracks, you're going to have an extremely high exposure, like being within 1 mile of an atomic bomb. But they had no systemic symptoms after the event.
Radiation isn't the only potential cause of the alleged paralysis. It could also be plain old fear.
In a stressful situation, we get our fight or flight response. Now, typically this gets us ready for action, but it can do the opposite. It can make us feel like we can't move, so-called being scared stiff.
Still, Dr. Hope believes that both brothers experiencing paralysis makes it unlikely that fear alone provoked this response. And the executive director of the UAP Medical Coalition, Ted Rowe, who personally interviewed the brothers, says paralysis is common in encounters with UFOs, also called UAPs.
It's very consistent in the literature that UAP witnesses experience paralysis. You have to ask yourself, what is this and where does it come from? Because it's very exotic.
So what could we be seeing in this video?
We've got an object or objects that are visible only in the infrared. So I really find this case compelling as an unexplained encounter of some kind.
And when you factor in the other anomalous behavior, Shadaga says these two encounters could be the most convincing evidence yet of the infamous hitchhiker effect.
It turns out that their sensors had to be replaced after this incident. Now, to me, that's remarkable corroborative evidence that something unusual happened here.
Our verdict? These lights came from a genuine UFO. With videos this strange, we still need to gather and analyze more data before we can make an identification here. As for the Tedesco brothers, we can report that they're fully recovered and have no lasting symptoms from the incident. Now, a mystery from the animal kingdom. Did you know that in China, zookeepers sometimes dress in panda suits in order to soothe panda cubs while they're being handled? So it's established that people can act like bears. But what happens when bears start acting like people? August 2023, China's Hangzhou Zoo in the eastern province of Zhejiang has the internet in a spiral, all thanks to one of its longtime residents. Meet Angela, the 4-year-old bear that's got everyone talking thanks to some peculiar behavior. Watch as Angela stands upright on her hind legs, using her arms to wave at spectators. Let's take a closer look. She stands completely straight, her back paws flat on the ground, sidestepping and waving in a calculated manner, just like a human. In fact, she's so human-like that many have asked, is that even a real bear, or just somebody in a suit? These folds on the creature's shoulders and bottom and its overall bizarre appearance have many people yelling, "Hoax!" Twitch streamer Zach Zinigami Nguyen was one of the first to post videos about the bear here in the States.
When I first saw the video with the bear, it looked like it was a man in a suit. And I think that's what a lot of people felt, is that gut reaction of, obviously this is fake.
The speculation goes that that blonde hairy patch you see here is really a screen covering an actor's face. Sound silly? Well, Chinese zoos have a record of such chicanery.
There's actually precedent of this in China itself. In 2013, they actually had a Mastiff dog that was trying to be passed off as an African lion. And then that happened again in 2021, but this time it was a golden retriever of all things.
An even more far-out theory is that this creature is part of a growing trend of humans who are spending small fortunes to look like animals.
Some guy named Tokasan spent $15,000 basically changing his body, metamorphizing into a collie dog. Another guy named Churro Ueda spent $23,000 to change himself into a photorealistic wolf.
These elaborate costumes allow their human inhabitants to live and breathe as an animal of their choice. However, employees from the zoos swear that Angela is in fact the real deal.
纯科当中所有的动物啊，比如说黑熊啊、森熊啊，在野外全部能够站立的。然后动物园里面的熊跟游客之间完全没有那种应激的状况了。有的时候会跟游客形成一种互动。
Is it possible that Angela is an actual bear with the intelligence to mimic human behavior?
Bears are really smart. They problem solve, they've used tools at times. Indigenous people from many places in the world actually think that bears are our ancestor. Some people are wondering, like, is this the first sign of a highly evolved bear?
In New Jersey, there was a black bear named Petals, who became internet famous for walking around on his 2 hind legs. He learned the trick after sustaining injuries to his front paws. Petals was adored by the neighborhood, with the exception of a local hunter who eventually shot him. And while Petals' story didn't have a happy ending, we at least know he was a real bear. Let's hear what our experts think about China's Angela. Biologist Floyd Hayes is doubtful that this is some elaborate costume.
We're not really seeing any seams or zippers along the costume. Also, this area in China tends to be very warm at this time of year, often over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It would probably be rather hot for a human to be inside one of those for any extended period of time during the summer.
For Hayes, the dead giveaway to the creature's real identity is this patch on its upper chest, which marks it as a sun bear.
Sun bears look very different than the black bears and brown bears we have in North America. They are smaller, their skin is more loose, and they had that big white crescent patch that goes across the chest.
And those loose folds are actually an evolutionary adaptation.
It's like this way so that when a predator grabs onto it, that its organs aren't damaged. Its skin is also tougher because it eats honey and bees, so it can withstand the sting.
So that explains Angela's appearance, but what about her behavior? Are we looking at some type of hyper-evolved specimen?
Bears are naturally curious, so they'll go up on their 2 feet. So the bear probably starts jumping up to get food and then realizes that it can just stand to reach the food easier. And then the people also probably think it's cuter and they give more food. So the behavior is reinforced.
Our verdict? We have to agree with the zoo's official statement. Angela is, in fact, a real sun bear. We're also happy to report that since this viral sensation, Hangzhou Zoo's attendance has gone up 30%, which will hopefully allow them to continue their important conservation work. We have all been startled by animals on the side of the road at night, but when one trucker spotted something unexplainable, apparently hitchhiking along the highway, we knew we had to go along for the ride. It's 2:30 a.m. on March 11, 2023, and a truck driver is making a haul along SR 87 between Phoenix and Payson, Arizona. The driver's dash cam is rolling when it captures this. Did you catch it? Look again. Seemingly out of nowhere, a translucent figure appears on the side of the highway. It's shaped like some sort of humanoid, standing upright, with what could be arms dangling at its sides. Field researcher Ken Gerhardt says phantom creatures like this one can be connected to the area's indigenous folklore.
When talking about Arizona, we have to consider the traditions of the indigenous Navajo people. And perhaps the scariest mythology or legend involves the so-called skinwalkers, known as the Yinagloshi, essentially believed to be a shaman who actually takes the form of an animal using witchcraft. And considering what we're seeing in the video has an amorphous and indistinguishable form, could this be somehow related to the skinwalker phenomenon?
In other words, is that a skinwalker in the process of changing its shape? The legend says skinwalkers must continually kill other life forms, or they will die themselves. But Gerhardt suggests that there could be a more extraterrestrial explanation to this video, considering this same area is also home to one of the most infamously debated UFO abductions ever reported.
Where this video was filmed is very close to the location of the so-called Travis Walton abduction, which occurred in 1975. Now, Travis Walton claims that he was zapped and then brought aboard an alien craft. Travis disappeared for a number of days and then eventually turned up completely disoriented and unsure about what had happened.
Travis's story was even adapted into a major motion picture, 1993's Fire in the Sky. And while many firmly believe in his account, there are those who think it was nothing more than an elaborate hoax. Could this also be some kind of stunt? Or is it for real? Believe it or not, this isn't the first trucker story that's come down the pike. Longtime viewers may remember when a long-haul trucker encountered this strange purple light on a desolate Wisconsin highway. That phenomenon ended up being the reflection of purple UV lights used to grow plants. Let's see if our experts find something more extraterrestrial on this stretch of blacktop. Let's start by exploring the Navajo skinwalker legend.
This area is very well known for skinwalker sightings. The native people have a long history with skinwalkers. However, skinwalkers generally take over the bodies of animals.
According to the indigenous peoples, skinwalkers can appear as coyotes, wolves, foxes, even bears. And although they come in a variety of shapes and sizes, there's one important factor that seems to be missing here.
The purpose of skinwalkers is to bring fear. There's nothing here that would make me afraid or make me fearful. So this doesn't appear to be a skinwalker to me.
However, Strain doesn't rule out the possibility of an otherworldly origin.
This is very near the Tonto National Forest, and This area has had many alien sightings in the past, and rumors of a secret UFO base being built somewhere on the forest. If that's true, could this be related to that? Could this be one of the Greys that maybe escaped from that location?
But hang on. Before we jump to the conclusion that this is one of the famous gray aliens described by alleged abductees over the years, we need to rule out the local fauna.
It's not immediately identifiable as a coyote or a jackrabbit or a deer caught in the headlights. The fact that it is translucent might turn to another, perhaps a more otherworldly explanation.
However, Meldrum isn't convinced this is evidence of a gray alien gone rogue.
That large dominant head seems to be missing altogether. So I don't think it's an alien. But then the fact that it is translucent, such that the white line on the shoulder of the road can be seen through it, begs the question of whether the driver actually witnessed what appears on the dash cam.
With the visual image being so hard to decipher, we brought this footage to our forensic video analyst, Michael Primo.
So upon examination of the dash cam video, we ran it through our authentication tool. It did indicate that the file has been recompressed or converted.
So does that mean this video is a fake? Not exactly.
Compression may have introduced additional anomalies that can explain what we're seeing here. I don't see any evidence to support malicious intent to deceive. Something was within that scene that was being illuminated by the semi-tractor trailers, but you've got a camera technology that just couldn't capture it accurately.
Our verdict? Unknown dash cam anomaly. According to Primo, there is definitely something on the side of this road, but its odd appearance can be attributed to poor recording equipment. If aliens have visited Earth, when did they first arrive? Well, some claim the earliest recorded accounts of alien encounters date back to 1440 BC. But one strange object discovered near some ancient fossils might be archaeological evidence that dates back much farther. It's the 1970s near Aiud, Romania. Construction workers are digging on the banks of the Mureș River when they uncover some seemingly ancient objects. One, this large hammerhead-like piece looks man-made and very old with a thick patina or layer of film produced by oxidation. Known as the Wedge of Aiud, it weighs nearly 5 pounds. It's close to 8 inches long, 5 inches wide, and 3 inches thick. And what's really weird, it appears to be connected to some very old bones.
The fossil remains that were located alongside this wedge were mastodon fossils. So the Wedge of Aiud kind of became this odd mystery object found next to an extinct animal.
Romanian authorities examine the items and estimate that the mastodon, or prehistoric elephant fossils, are 2.5 million years old, suggesting the wedge is from the same era. That's strange, since modern humans have only been around for about 200,000 years. So it was sent to Romanian archaeologists and a Swiss lab for further study.
They figured out that it was artificially created because the holes in the shape were machine-made.
What's more, the Wedge of Aiud is 90% aluminum and has the properties of 11 other metals. The fact that the wedge is aluminum is especially peculiar because while aluminum is a naturally occurring element, it has to be extracted from ore in a complicated process that wasn't discovered until the 19th century. So given all that, is it possible this object wasn't made by early humans, but by some other intelligent being?
Ufologists have come to the conclusion that perhaps the Wedge of Aiud is part of a UFO landing gear that ran over the mastodon and killed it on purpose. Cattle mutilations that have occurred in the past indicate, at least to them, that aliens will purposefully kill mammals for scientific study.
So could this wedge be proof that aliens have been studying life on Earth since even before there were modern humans?
It's a strange historical anachronism that should not exist.
There's a name in archaeology for these kinds of finds, or rather an acronym. They're called OOPARTs, for out-of-place artifacts. So could the OOPART known as the Wedge of Aiud be proof of an extraterrestrial exploration, or something we haven't considered yet? Let's turn to our experts to hammer this one out. First, anthropologist Kathy Strain explains that if the wedge was made by modern humans, it being found near prehistoric fossils would seem to defy the archaeological concept of superposition.
Superposition means that when you find two items at the same level, the same depth, they're likely associated with each other. However, aluminum wasn't capable of being smelted and created into an object until 1825.
So the superposition theory would suggest the wedge and the mastodon existed at the same time, deepening the mystery. But hold on, there's one important missing clue we need to consider.
It's on a river. Rivers bring things from far upstream and deposit them in banks in flood episodes. This is disturbed context, and you cannot equate things time-wise in a disturbed context.
So if the location can't confirm anything, how can we date this wedge? Barnhart says the patina can be a good indicator of its age, but maybe not in this case.
Metal very quickly becomes oxidized, and then processes like being buried in sand can turn that oxidation into patina. But that kind of patina can grow in just a few years. It doesn't take thousands of years for the kind of patina that grows on aluminum to form.
So maybe it's not as old as originally thought, but that still leaves us asking, who made it? Is it possible it's from an alien spaceship? Aluminum is often used on aircraft instead of steel or iron, because even though it's weaker than those two metals, it's also more lightweight. But one Romanian historian believes the wedge is from an earthbound craft, specifically the landing gear of a World War II German Messerschmitt Me-262 fighter jet. Remember, it was found in the former Axis power of Romania.
We were using aluminum and aerodynamics at that time. We know that aircraft flew across this area many times during the war. And I think it's just a piece that happened to fall off and then over time worked itself down into the sand.
Our verdict, based on the material and the design, this is likely a piece of landing gear, though from a German military plane rather than a UFO. It probably ended up next to the fossil bones when the high waters from the Morris River disturbed the surrounding soil. But since we can't accurately date the aluminum, the wedge of Aiud could be much older and more mysterious than we can even imagine. According to the British newspaper The Independent, nearly 1,000 UFO reports were made in the UK from 2021 through the first half of 2023. The country's not that big, so that's saying something. And when one photographer claimed to have captured evidence, it was time to dispatch the proof team. June 19th, 2023. A photographer is strolling about the countryside in Devon, England, when a glint of light in the sky suddenly catches his eye. He grabs his camera to get a snapshot of this. A strange metallic-looking object is captured above the hills. Close up, it appears trapezoidal. Some people who see the photo claim it has what looks like rocket boosters or even landing wheels on the bottom. But journalist MJ Banayas explains that's not all.
According to reports, the man says that when he saw this object, it was surrounded by a force field, and claimed that this object shot off into the sky shortly after at 1,000 miles an hour. It's very reminiscent of sort of an old school 1950s flying saucer. It's got the rounded bottom, it's got the dome on top. In fact, it does remind me a little bit of the famous 1952 photo of the Passaic, New Jersey UFO.
In July 1952, George Stock and a friend were near Stock's home when they spotted a strange craft approaching. Stock said the object eerily made no sound, came to a complete stop, and floated about 200 feet above them. In fact, Stock said it was so close he could have shot it down with a rifle, but instead, he shot it with his camera. That photo captured what looks like a solid, metallic, disc-shaped craft in flight. It had a dome on top and was estimated to be about 30 feet in diameter. But whether the Passaic craft or this one in Devon are actually extraterrestrial, that's the ultimate question.
UFOs do exist in the sense of we cannot simply identify everything in the sky in a given moment. We do not have enough data, therefore it remains unidentified.
It turns out that extraterrestrials aren't the only ones interested in utilizing flying saucers. In the late 1950s, a company called Avro Aircraft Limited began constructing one for the U.S. military called the Avro car. The project was eventually dropped, but perhaps these new photos can finally show us what real UFOs are made of. We begin with astrophotographer Andrew McCarthy, who has an immediate gut reaction to the photo.
My first impression is it's an authentic photo. I don't believe this was doctored in any way.
And he believes there are some revealing clues in the picture.
For one, we can see it in front of the clouds, so we know whatever it is, it's probably within a few miles away.
So is this object simply something ordinary flying in the skies above England?
Drones today can come in all shapes and sizes, but when I look at this closely, I don't see the usual telltale signs of forced struts holding propellers, so I don't think it's a drone.
Does it even look like it's something that could fly at all?
It certainly doesn't seem like it fits the profile of an aircraft, so that leaves a lot of mystery to what this object could be.
Some have speculated it's a mylar balloon, which can be formed in strange shapes like this. But physicist Matthew Shadagis isn't so sure.
It's possible that this is some sort of balloon, but I don't think that this is a mylar balloon because mylar is pretty reflective, and this is pretty dark in color. It looks to me like this could potentially be a bird or maybe a pair of birds where you have these wing-like formations coming out. But again, it's really hard to say when you've zoomed in on just a few pixels on a very large field image.
So, could it be a UFO?
I don't see any evidence of wheels or rocket boosters or force fields or anything else that has been claimed about this picture. All of those features can simply be brought on by the extreme amount of zoom on this very distant or small object, making it really hard to claim that any of these features are distinctive like cockpits or windows or things like that.
And despite the eyewitness testimony, Shadagis notes the old adage, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
It is conceivable for a UFO to zip away at a high speed. However, we only have the eyewitness's claim of this. We see no evidence of high speed, of course, from what is just a single photograph. So my final verdict is genuine UFO. But that verdict comes simply from a lack of information.
Our verdict? For now, without any definitive details, we agree with our experts. We've got a genuine UFO. But remember, that doesn't mean it's an alien spacecraft. So here's hoping that photographer keeps his camera handy to capture another strange object that we can identify. We spend a fair amount of time at the bottom of the ocean on this show because that's where we find some of the most inexplicable stuff we've ever come across. And that's certainly the case with this next uncanny discovery. We couldn't tell if it was made by nature, by humans, or by another intelligent species. Can you? It's 2012 off the island of Amami Oshima in southern Japan. Underwater photographer Yoji Okada is diving in search of a strange phenomenon that he first encountered in this area back in 1995.
最初見た時は、一体何なんだろうと思いましたけど。
This time, he's got his camera ready. Yoji's photo captures a bizarre geometric formation. Ridges in the sand make a uniform concentric pattern that stretches almost 7 feet across the ocean floor.
海底に押し付けたような模様だったので、誰がこんなことをしたんだろうと思いました。
Journalist Aaron McCarthy says the internet wasted no time stirring up otherworldly theories.
People pretty much immediately dubbed them underwater crop circles for their resemblance to the crop circles that pop up in fields on land.
The term crop circle was officially coined in the 1980s, But in an earlier incident from the 1960s, a farmer in Australia claimed he saw a flying saucer rising up from his lagoon before finding a nest-like circular mark 30 feet in diameter in the lagoon's floating reeds. And if you believe the rumors, this wouldn't be the first time a circular object of alien origin appeared in our oceans.
In 2022, there was actually a 4.2-mile diameter circular object that appeared off the coast of Lima, Peru. And some people believe that it could either be a submerged alien ship or a submerged alien base.
However, others have suggested these artistic designs have a different purpose.
Some believe that crop circles, whether they're on land or in the ocean, contain some kind of hidden alien messages in them.
In fact, one scientist claims to have decoded some of the circles, which he says provide descriptions of the future from aliens or human time travelers. He also has a theory that they act as directional markers for these travelers. Take another look. The neat repetition of those ridges, all forming an apparently perfect circle, here, here, and then right here. It looks too precise to be natural, don't you think? So who or what could be behind it? First, NASA geologist Dr. Bob Anderson looks into whether or not this formation could be connected to the crop circles we find on land.
This has a very elaborate design, but it's the opposite of a crop circle because a crop circle basically removes the material and leaves it behind, whereas this is actually building the material and building up.
So this may be structurally different from a circle of flattened crops, but archaeologist Dr. Ed Barnhart considers if there's still a possibility this is a site where a UFO landed.
It's really only 5 or 6 foot wide. A vessel that could do that, its gear that would touch the bottom would probably make a much larger imprint than this simple circle. Also, something like that that would land on the ocean floor eventually has to take off. And that would cause a lot of disturbance right at that point and likely wash away any kind of footprint.
Anderson adds that the formation structure also seems to rule out this landing site theory.
This is actually a build-up, and so therefore, if you had a UFO that was landed on the bottom, it would give the impression downward, not upward.
Yet, it could still be some kind of extraterrestrial message, right?
This is a very transient area. There are currents in this area that are going to eventually race this away. So if you're trying to use it as a marker, it should be down in the rock. This is in sand that's very dynamic, it's moving. And so whatever the reason is, this was a very temporary type of situation for building this structure.
Well, with continued observation, Yoji discovers this temporary situation.
2011年に、また違う場所で水深24メートルのところで
A fish making a sand sculpture? Marine biologist Dr. Shay Steingast thinks that's exactly what happened.
The fish that created this pattern worked tirelessly for about a week to make this design, just to find a female fish that wants to lay their eggs in the center of this design.
Apparently, it works like this. The male puffer fish swims back and forth, carving out the radial pattern with the flapping of his fins. Then, he decorates the circle with seashells. Finally, he perfects the look and coloring with the addition of fine sediment. And the more intricate the design, the more likely it will attract a mate.
The beauty of it is that these ridges and hills actually buffer the eggs from the motion of the seafloor, but there is universal geometry that's taking place here, which makes me wonder to what degree animals actually understand the concept of art and abstract thinking.
Our verdict? Fish love. Yes, these markings were created by a pufferfish flapping his fins along the ocean floor to attract a mate. And we like Dr. Steingast's thinking. If a fish can be artistic, who says it can't be romantic, too? In a previous episode, we investigated instances of UFO sightings out of California during an Independence Day fireworks celebration. Our experts were unable to explain some of them. And now, on the opposite side of the country, we found a similar 4th of July phenomenon. Could this new evidence help us finally solve the mystery? It's Independence Day, 2019. Desiree Leanne is sitting at home enjoying the holiday with her mother in Port Richey, Florida.
Everything was really normal, just random fireworks around my neighborhood. And then we saw the light that stood out and it kind of hovered in a strange pattern.
Intrigued, Desiree heads to the backyard for a better view and captures this.
I'm pretty sure that those are not fireworks.
3 bright lights in a triangular formation appear to be slowly moving in sync. Desiree doesn't know what she's seeing, but she does know what it isn't.
It wasn't a plane. If it was a helicopter, it would have made noise, but they moved, I feel, with intention. Like it was doing something or going somewhere.
Could that intention mean that we're being watched? Some believe that aliens have been gathering data and observing humanity during times of cultural importance. In fact, historian and author Amy Title says one of those times appears to be during Independence Day.
The National UFO Reporting Center is more likely to receive a call on July 4th than any other day of the year.
And Title notes the phenomenon goes back decades.
On July 4th, 1947, United Airlines Flight 105 leaving Boise, Idaho, Captain Emil Smith saw 5 disc-like objects, one larger than the other 4, heading towards the plane. Then they changed their course and flew parallel to him. He said he flashed his landing lights at whatever he was seeing, and they responded intelligently by changing formation.
The idea that aliens like watching us for their own amusement or research is sometimes called galactic zoo theory, similar to the interest today's anthropologists have in Neanderthals. But before we go too far down those rabbit holes, let's see what our experts say about this footage. On an average clear night away from a city, a person can see between 2,000 and 3,000 stars. So are these just lights we see in the sky all the time?
Albeit subtle, we can see movement from them. But stars appear to move with the Earth's orbit. They don't move as fast as what we see here. So definitely not stars.
What about Starlink satellites? Starlink was established by Elon Musk as a network of satellites that can provide internet access anywhere on the Earth. The plan is to ultimately have up to 42,000 of them circling the globe. Is that what we're seeing?
Starlink appears in the night sky like a stream of lights, almost like pearls in a long row moving across the night sky. You don't see that here at all. These objects, their movement is very subtle and slow and not consistent with what we see with satellite.
So are we looking at genuine UFOs? Rich Hoffman of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies has his doubts.
If there were strong evidence that indicated that this was flying in some sort of an intelligent fashion, I could maybe accept the fact that it is an unknown, but I don't see it being in the world of being an alien spacecraft. You've got a lack of significant movement for a period of time. You don't have anything instantaneous acceleration.
Instead, McMillan believes what we're seeing is impressive technology, just not the alien kind.
A couple of things that lead me to believe we're possibly looking at drones here. One is the height in terms of altitude. We can see the horizon there. We can see from the other houses. These objects are relatively low to the ground or within the ceiling cap that commercial drones are allowed to operate on.
But why would drones fly in triangle formation? McMillan says it's an illusion.
Looking at this from a distance, you can make out shapes because our brains want to detect those patterns. But in reality, we don't have an idea of how far away the objects are from each other.
McMillan adds that drones filming 4th of July fireworks is not only a common event, it's been done before over Port Richey, like this celebration in 2016.
It's just very common nowadays for people to film fireworks from the drones and get a cool perspective that we hadn't seen before.
The night sky over the Nevada desert was unusually silent, a heavy, almost tangible quiet that seemed to press against the edges of reality, as if the world itself were holding its breath, anticipating something unexplainable, something that could not be captured in satellite images or dismissed by the local authorities, who were already skeptical of the mounting reports flooding in from the scattered outposts along the barren highways. It was here, amid the rusted signs warning travelers of sudden dust storms and the skeletal remains of long-forgotten mining towns, that the first signal appeared on infrared scanners operated by a group of independent researchers who had long been fascinated with the fringe possibilities of aerial phenomena, people who spend more nights peering into the invisible spectrum than sleeping in their beds, guided by a combination of intuition, obsession, and the lingering hope that someone, somewhere, would finally have to acknowledge that the sky held secrets humanity had barely begun to comprehend. Dr. Lena Whitaker, the lead investigator, had spent years compiling eyewitness accounts, cataloging footage, and analyzing thermal anomalies that defied the conventional explanations offered by both the military and private aerospace companies, and tonight, she found herself hunched over a set of screens in a makeshift lab erected from shipping containers, each monitor flickering with static and data streams, when an unexpected blip appeared, a concentrated heat signature moving with an intelligence and speed that seemed impossible for any known aircraft. The shape was elongated yet irregular, almost organic in its undulations, and as it hovered briefly over a ridge, Lena's pulse quickened, because the readings were not consistent with conventional propulsion systems, and whatever it was interacting with the environment in ways that suggested some form of awareness, a sentience that made the hair on her arms stand on end. Across the radio, her colleague Marcus Ortega muttered something inaudible, his voice tense, but the connection was crackling, disrupted by interference that Lena instinctively recognized as the presence of electromagnetic anomalies, a hallmark of encounters documented in obscure files and classified reports she had spent years trying to access through Freedom of Information requests, reports that hinted at craft capable of bending energy fields, of becoming partially invisible to both the human eye and conventional radar, and this was exactly the scenario she had been preparing for, rehearsing responses in her mind, rehearsing the calm tone she would need to maintain while recording data that could either prove her theories or get her dismissed as a lunatic. Meanwhile, in a valley several miles away, a series of campers had reported strange animalistic noises, guttural and resonant, echoing off the cliffs in a way that made the hairs on the back of the necks of even seasoned outdoorsmen stand rigid. The descriptions were inconsistent, some swearing it was a massive bear, others claiming it sounded almost human, a hybrid growl that sent a shiver through the spine of anyone within earshot, and the timing of these reports, coinciding precisely with the appearance of the thermal anomaly on Lena's monitors, suggested a connection too deliberate to be mere coincidence. Roughly humanoid but distorted, covered in a thick, bristling coat that glinted under the infrared glow, and it moved with deliberate, unnerving coordination, sometimes crouching, sometimes stepping with a precision that implied intelligence rather than instinct, and when it paused to gaze toward the hovering anomaly, Lena's mind raced, contemplating the impossible idea that the two, beast and craft, were aware of one another, communicating in some cryptic exchange beyond the reach of human understanding. She reached for the voice recorder, narrating every detail in a tone that she tried to keep calm, though her chest heaved with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, because if this footage survived, if it reached the wider scientific community intact, it could redefine everything: the definition of sentient life, the limits of terrestrial biology, the very nature of the universe and humanity's place within it, and yet there was a creeping awareness that such knowledge would not come without consequence, that the more they documented, the more they risked drawing attention not only from the skeptics and media sensationalists but potentially from forces capable of observing their actions in ways they could not yet comprehend. Beyond the lab, a series of unmarked black helicopters appeared on the horizon, descending silently, almost as if the desert itself had summoned them in response to the anomaly, and Lena recognized the pattern from declassified files describing covert military responses to unexplained aerial phenomena, operations so secretive that few had dared speak of them publicly, and the realization hit her with an icy clarity: they were not merely witnesses to an extraordinary event, they were now participants in an unfolding confrontation, a collision of human curiosity and cosmic mystery that could spiral in directions none of them were prepared to navigate. The infrared readings continued to spike unpredictably, showing bursts of energy that suggested propulsion systems operating outside known physics, thermal signatures that seemed to ebb and flow like living tissue, and subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in mass distribution, implying that the object could manipulate gravity or inertia in ways that rendered all conventional aircraft obsolete. And Lena scribbled notes furiously, her handwriting erratic, capturing every oscillation, every pulse. Knowing that the slightest delay could result in missing a critical piece of evidence. As the night deepened, the desert became a theater of tension, distant growls and the occasional, almost human-sounding roar from the valley below interspersed with mechanical whirs and the faint hum of energy from the anomaly, a combination so surreal it felt like being caught between waking and dreaming, between the known laws of nature and an evolving reality that defied classification. Marcus and Lena exchanged glances that communicated more than words could, an unspoken agreement that they were witnessing an intersection of phenomena rarely recorded, phenomena that challenged every assumption they had ever held about life, intelligence, and the fragile bubble of human comprehension. Hours passed with the relentless observation of movements too precise to be random, too coordinated to be coincidental. The humanoid bear entity appeared to respond to light fluctuations emitted by the hovering craft, adjusting its stance, sometimes charging, sometimes retreating, in a rhythm that implied some form of recognition or ritual, and Lena's notes began to reflect hypotheses she had never dared voice publicly. Could this be evidence of an entirely new species adapted to symbiotic or communicative interaction with extraterrestrial visitors? Or was it the result of manipulation, of experimental technology designed to influence terrestrial fauna in ways previously considered impossible? As dawn approached, the horizon blushing with tentative light, the craft finally descended behind a ridge, vanishing from the infrared monitors with a suddenness that was almost theatrical, leaving the humanoid bear standing motionless, its form receding into the morning mist as though it had never been there at all, and Lena felt an unfamiliar emptiness mixed with an intense need to document, to make sense of what had transpired, because for all the hours spent analyzing data, the true impact of this night would not reside in raw numbers or infrared graphs but in the enduring proof that something had moved beyond the realm of the conceivable, something that challenged the very definitions of biology, physics, and consciousness, and the question that lingered in every mind, silent yet insistent, was whether humanity was ready, or even capable, of confronting the reality they had just glimpsed, a reality where the sky was no longer merely a backdrop for human ambition but an active, conscious stage on which forces far greater than themselves played, and where the line between predator and witness, between terrestrial and extraterrestrial, had blurred in ways that would haunt every thought, every dream, and every decision from this night forward. The desert sun had barely risen, casting long, angular shadows across the jagged rocks and sparse vegetation, when Lena Whitaker realized that the previous night's events were far from over, that the infrared anomaly and the humanoid bear, if it could even be called a bear, were no longer distant curiosities but active participants in a phenomenon that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, almost sentient in its orchestration. She rubbed her eyes, exhausted from hours of observation, yet unable to pull herself away from the screens, because the moment the first light of day illuminated the landscape, new readings began to emerge, subtle shifts in thermal energy that hinted the craft had not left entirely, that it had merely repositioned, observing the valley from a vantage point hidden to conventional optics, and as the heat signature intensified in a jagged pattern over the canyon, Lena realized that the entity below, tall, sinewy, covered in coarse hair and with movements too deliberate for an ordinary animal, was beginning to track it once more, pacing along a path that suggested both curiosity and caution, a predator engaging with prey in a game that defied explanation. Marcus Ortega, still groggy from lack of sleep, pointed to a series of oscillations on the infrared monitor, noting with increasing anxiety that the craft seemed to emit pulses of energy at frequencies that caused minor distortions in the environment. Small shrubs appeared to wither and vibrate momentarily, dust clouds formed in sudden bursts as if touched by invisible fingers, and metallic surfaces along the canyon walls reflected an unnatural glow, almost as if reality itself were bending. Around the presence of the object, Lena, feeling a mixture of dread and exhilaration, speculated aloud that they were witnessing technology so advanced it could manipulate physical matter at a localized scale, and the implications for humanity's understanding of physics were staggering, potentially rewriting principles thought immutable for centuries. By mid-morning, the situation escalated beyond mere observation. The humanoid bear, responding to subtle changes in the craft's energy output, had begun a series of movements that were more than instinctual. It climbed ridges with a grace that contradicted its massive frame, stopped at precise intervals, sniffing and listening, and occasionally raised its head skyward, letting out a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the canyon walls, a communication perhaps, a challenge, or even a warning, and Lena instinctively recorded every nuance, knowing that this could be evidence of a form of intelligence not previously considered possible among terrestrial fauna. The surrounding environment became a theater of tension. Small birds took flight from hidden perches, scattering in chaotic flurries that highlighted the underlying stress in the ecosystem. Rocks shifted as if something massive was brushing against them, and the air itself seemed to shimmer in irregular patterns, a visual manifestation of the anomalous energy Lena's instruments captured, creating a surreal landscape where the boundaries between natural and artificial, organic and technological, blurred. A structure to the humanoid bear, but smaller and more agile, emerged from the shadows, scanning the area with eyes that reflected the infrared camera's glow, and immediately Lena recognized the pattern. They were witnessing not a single anomaly but an interaction between multiple life forms, potentially a species previously unknown, whose behavior appeared intricately linked to the presence of the unidentified craft, raising profound questions about coevolution, adaptation, and the limits of human comprehension. The next hour passed in a tense crescendo. The larger entity began vocalizing, low growls punctuated by shrill whistles, sounds that carried over the canyon with a deliberate cadence, and the energy readings from the craft intensified in perfect synchrony, surging in waves that caused minor tremors in the ground and small bursts of heat that disrupted the senses momentarily. Lena realized with awe that what they were documenting was an exchange, a dialogue of energy and movement between species and technology, and she hypothesized that this interaction might be a form of learning, of communication, a convergence of intelligence manifesting in ways humanity had never anticipated. By noon, Lena and Marcus had exhausted conventional explanations. The anomalies were too precise, the behaviors too coordinated, and the energy readings too complex to be dismissed as optical illusions, atmospheric distortions, or hallucinations from fatigue. The data suggested an unprecedented scenario, a symbiotic or communicative relationship between extraterrestrial technology and terrestrial entities, a partnership that operated outside the parameters of human engineering, biology, and physics. The situation escalated further when a sudden surge in electromagnetic interference caused all digital equipment to fail temporarily. Screens flickering to black as static filled the room. In that moment, Lena felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise, an intuitive warning that whatever forces were at play were aware of their observation, and for the first time, the possibility that their presence might provoke an unintended response became real. She whispered to Marcus that they needed to be cautious, that the anomaly could perceive their actions and potentially react in ways that were unpredictable and possibly dangerous, and Marcus, glancing at the windows that framed the sun-drenched valley, nodded silently, the gravity of their situation settling over him with a weight that matched the oppressive desert heat. In the late afternoon, as Lena attempted to reboot the equipment and restore the feed, a subtle but unmistakable movement caught her eye. The larger humanoid bear had ascended a steep cliff, pausing at the edge to survey the valley, and for several minutes, it remained motionless, its body tense, ears swiveling, and eyes fixed on a point just beyond human perception. Then, without warning, it leapt across a gap in the canyon, landing with uncanny precision, sending up a cloud of dust, and immediately the craft reacted. descending in a slow spiral toward the point of impact, releasing pulses of heat and light that illuminated the cliffside in erratic bursts, creating an otherworldly tableau that made Lena's stomach churn with both fear and exhilaration. The interplay of movement, energy, and sound escalated into a symphony of the surreal. Distant cliffs reverberated with vibrations from the creature's vocalizations. Heat readings oscillated in complex, fractal patterns on the infrared monitors, and the second, smaller entity darted through the brush, performing movements that suggested scouting, signaling, or perhaps attempting to influence the behavior of the larger creature in coordination with the craft, a choreography of intelligence and intent so sophisticated it challenged every assumption about terrestrial life. As evening approached, Lena's mind raced with hypotheses. Were they observing a form of biological technical symbiosis, a mutually beneficial interaction between species and unknown technology, or were they witnessing the manipulation of a species for purposes beyond comprehension, controlled or guided by forces operating in a realm inaccessible to conventional science? Every hypothesis brought more questions than answers, each more unsettling than the last, and Lena realized that the line between observer and participant was narrowing dangerously. The phenomena were not passive, and their actions, however cautious, were already influencing the behavior of the entities below, demonstrating a level of environmental awareness and intentionality that was profoundly disconcerting. As night fell for the second time, the valley transformed again. Shadows deepened, the desert air cooled, and the creature's thermal signatures became more distinct against the backdrop of the darkening landscape, the larger bear moving with stealth and purpose, the smaller one executing intricate maneuvers, and the craft hovering with intermittent pulses, almost as if communicating, rehearsing, or performing an intelligence test. And Lena felt an overwhelming responsibility to document, to ensure that the proof they were capturing could withstand scrutiny, because the world outside the canyon would never believe what unfolded here without irrefutable evidence, and she understood that the next hours might yield the most critical data, or the most dangerous consequences. Marcus, scanning the infrared monitors with meticulous care, suddenly froze, pointing at a cluster of readings that suggested a third energy signature entering the canyon, faster, smaller, sharper in its oscillations, moving unpredictably, and Lena felt a chill ripple down her spine, realizing that they were witnessing an escalation, an introduction of a new element into an already volatile scenario, an entity or technology whose intentions were unknown, whose interactions could alter the delicate balance of observation they had maintained, and as the new signature approached, both humanoid entities reacted instantaneously. The larger bear crouched, tailing its body low to the ground, while the smaller one darted in a flurry of rapid movements, and the primary craft surged, releasing concentrated pulses of energy that lit the canyon like a miniature aurora, creating a tableau so intense it was almost unbearable to watch. Lena's hand shook as she adjusted the recording devices, aware that each pulse, each movement, was a moment of profound significance, a fragment of understanding that could redefine the parameters of intelligence, biology, and technology, and as the night deepened, the valley became a theater of unpredictable interactions, an extraordinary intersection of life forms and energy, a ballet of sentience and cosmic mystery, and Lena felt both awe and fear, knowing that whatever happened next would be the defining moment of her career, and perhaps humanity's understanding of what truly exists beyond the thin veil of the observable world. Nightfall deepened across the Nevada desert like an inky curtain, swallowing the jagged cliffs and barren expanses into shadows so dense that even infrared cameras struggled to maintain clarity, yet Lena Whitaker and Marcus Ortega, exhausted but resolute, remained glued to the flickering monitors in their makeshift observation outpost, a small cluster of shipping containers hastily retrofitted with thermal scanners, motion detectors, and improvised power systems. The previous 48 hours had transformed from routine reconnaissance into a high-stakes engagement with phenomena that defied classification, the mysterious hovering craft and the humanoid bear now acting as central players in a theater of cosmic intrigue, and Lena's mind raced with both terror and fascination as she considered the implications, that these entities, biological and technological, might be orchestrating interactions far beyond the comprehension of contemporary science, operating under a logic and intelligence entirely alien to human reasoning, and that every observation they recorded carried the weight of potential paradigm shifts for physics, biology, and the understanding of consciousness itself. As the night deepened, a subtle vibration hummed through the ground, imperceptible to casual observers but pronounced in Lina's instruments, suggesting that the canyon was alive with energy, oscillations, resonances, and thermal pulses that formed a language of sorts, a pattern that seemed deliberate, encoded within the environment itself, and Lina, scribbling notes feverishly, hypothesized that the humanoid bear was not acting in isolation but responding to a complex informational network mediated by the hovering craft, a network that modulated energy, motion, and possibly even cognition across multiple species and technological systems, something resembling a symbiotic ecosystem on a scale humanity had never imagined. Marcus, scanning the terrain with a high-powered infrared lens, whispered in disbelief as another signature appeared, small, fast, darting movements that seemed semi-intelligent, weaving through the canyon's brush in ways too coordinated for random wildlife, their thermal footprints intertwining with the bear's path and the craft's pulses, forming patterns that Lina recognized as intentional, a triadic interaction suggesting communication or experimentation, and she shivered, realizing that their data was capturing a living, responsive system operating under laws that might be incompatible with human observation, a theater in which every motion, sound, and burst of energy carried layers of meaning imperceptible to the untrained mind. Hours passed in tense silence punctuated by sudden surges of light and heat. The craft emitted pulses of infrared energy that created shimmering distortions in the desert air, illuminating the humanoid bear's form in uncanny detail, revealing musculature, sinew, and thick bristling hair that rippled unnaturally, as if resonating in response to the craft's emissions, and the smaller entities executed darting maneuvers, sometimes approaching, sometimes retreating, creating a visual pattern that suggested both reconnaissance and social interaction, a level of coordination Lina could scarcely quantify, and yet she knew that every frame recorded could become the cornerstone of undeniable proof that life and intelligence existed in forms far beyond terrestrial understanding. At one point, the larger humanoid bear paused atop a ridge, silhouetted against the faint glow of moonlight, and let out a guttural, almost melodic call, a series of tones that reverberated across the canyon walls and seemed to trigger a synchronized response in the hovering craft. Pulses of energy rippled outward, radiating across the valley in geometric patterns, causing dust to rise and small rocks to vibrate. And Lina's pulse quickened as she realized that this was no mere display of instinct or mimicry, but a deliberate exchange, possibly a conversation, a negotiation of presence and dominance that used energy and motion rather than spoken words, a language that human ears could not perceive but that resonated with biological and technological entities alike. The magnitude of what they were observing began to press on Lina's mind in waves. Every hypothesis seemed to dissolve into greater complexity, the behaviors defying ecological, physical, and evolutionary explanation, and yet the pattern of interaction suggested intelligence and intentionality, raising questions about the very definition of life. Could consciousness exist outside organic brains, mediated through energy and coordinated behavior? Could technology, biology, and cognition form a continuum in which distinctions blurred, creating systems that function simultaneously as living organism, machine, and environmental architect? The questions haunted Lina, and even Marcus, typically pragmatic and skeptical, seemed struck by the gravity of the implications, muttering under his breath about species we weren't meant to encounter and engineering we can't even comprehend, a tension that underscored the unique danger of their observation. The phenomena were not just anomalous, they were adaptive, capable of reading their environment, reacting to human presence, and perhaps even anticipating interference in ways that could threaten those who observe without caution. As midnight approached, the environment became increasingly surreal, faint thermal distortions twisted across canyon walls, small animals abandoned their habitats in erratic flurries, and distant cliffs echoed with resonant growls and whistles, the cadence of sound and energy suggesting deliberate signaling among the creatures and possibly coordination with the craft, which hovered with intermittent energy surges, reacting instantaneously to motion in the canyon below, sometimes pulsing in rapid succession, other times holding a steady, low-energy hum that created subtle vibrations in the ground, like a heartbeat, a rhythm that seemed to organize the behavior of the humanoid bear and the smaller entities into synchronized patterns of movement and response. Lena adjusted her instruments, realizing that her notes alone could not convey the intricacy of the unfolding scenario. The thermal data, energy pulses, and motion tracking form a multidimensional matrix of interactions, each layer dependent on and influencing the others, a dynamic web of cognition and response that extended beyond the human sensory spectrum, and she became increasingly convinced that the canyon itself had become an arena for observation and experimentation, a control ecosystem where intelligence manifested not just through physical action but through energy modulation, environmental manipulation, and responsive interaction. The tension escalated further when a sudden burst of energy from the hovering craft caused a localized electromagnetic pulse, temporarily shutting down all digital recording equipment, leaving Lena and Marcus with only their auditory and visual impressions in near-complete darkness, a moment that highlighted their vulnerability. The entities below could manipulate their environment with precision and power, and any misstep could provoke reactions they were ill-prepared to handle, reinforcing the realization that observation alone carried inherent risk, that being present in this unfolding experiment placed them in a delicate, precarious position. When power and data streams were restored, they discovered that the humanoid bear had approached an area where dust and rock had previously been undisturbed, moving with stealth and precision, its smaller counterparts flanking it, while the craft above emitted pulse signals that seemed to guide or coordinate the ground movements, an orchestration so sophisticated it resembled a military operation but carried out by entities whose motivations, intelligence, and capabilities remained fundamentally alien. Lena attempted to decode the patterns, correlating energy bursts, vocalizations, and movement trajectories, hypothesizing that they might be witnessing ritualized behavior or a form of play, or perhaps even a test of strength, cognition, and environmental mastery, but every theory dissolved into deeper uncertainty as the sequences became more complex, almost choreographed, defying conventional understanding of animal behavior or artificial intelligence, and presenting evidence that intelligence and awareness could manifest through a hybrid of organic and technological processes in ways previously unimagined. Hours later, as the faint glimmer of pre-dawn light touched the canyon, Lena and Marcus observed the humanoid bear perform an extraordinary sequence of motions, leaping across multiple ridges, pausing to make guttural calls, interacting with the smaller entities in a manner suggestive of instruction or signaling, and all the while the craft hovered, pulsing energy in patterns that mirrored the creature's movements, creating a luminous ballet of interaction, a performance both terrifying and breathtaking in its complexity, leaving Lena to record frantic notes and sketches, knowing that the significance of this event could not be overstated, that it might represent the first tangible evidence of a form of intelligence operating outside conventional biology and human technology, and that the night's documentation could forever alter humanity's conception of life, consciousness, and the cosmos. As the sun fully emerged, bathing the canyon in pale gold, the trio of entities, craft and two biological forms, vanished from direct view, leaving only residual thermal traces and subtle environmental shifts, evidence that they had withdrawn deliberately, perhaps satisfied with their observations of the humans below, or perhaps recalibrating for the next stage of interaction, and Lena, breathless and overwhelmed, understood that the magnitude of what they had captured went beyond simple proof of extraterrestrial presence. It was a window into a network intelligence that intertwined biology, technology, and energy in ways humanity had scarcely imagined, and the canyon, once a quiet desert landscape, had become a crucible for phenomena that would challenge every principle, assumption, and theory upon which human understanding had been built. Dawn barely cast its first light over the jagged ridges of the Nevada desert when Lena Whitaker realized that the events of the previous nights had irreversibly changed the nature of their mission, that observation alone was no longer enough, and that every decision, every movement, could influence phenomena they barely understood, phenomena that seemed capable of adapting to human presence and responding with intelligence, precision, and a level of awareness that blurred the line between the observer and the observed. As she and Marcus packed up their monitoring equipment, the air carried a faint vibration, a subtle hum barely perceptible but clearly measurable on their instruments, signaling that the hovering craft, or whatever it was, had not fully retreated, that it lingered beyond the canyon ridge, observing, calculating, interacting with the humanoid bear and its smaller companions in ways that might soon involve the humans themselves. Marcus adjusted the infrared lens to capture the faintest traces of residual thermal energy across the valley floor, revealing trails that suggested movement along a circuitous path, not aimless wandering but purposeful navigation, patterns that implied a level of planning and situational awareness that Lena struggled to reconcile with what she had ever considered animal cognition. The larger humanoid bear moved with astonishing precision, pausing to orient itself at specific points in the terrain, while the smaller entities executed complementary maneuvers, and Lena noted that the energy pulses from the hovering craft now aligned with these actions in a consistent rhythm, as if orchestrating the activity below, creating a dynamic feedback loop between technology and biology that suggested intelligence manifesting through coordination across species and systems. By mid-morning, the canyon became a crucible of activity. Gusts of wind swirled us into irregular spirals, seemingly reacting to the energy discharges from the craft, while faint infrared anomalies flickered along cliff walls and rocky outcrops, creating the visual impression that the environment itself had become alive, responsive, and participatory in the unfolding events. Lena's pulse quickened as she realized they were witnessing not a single interaction but an emergent network of energy, movement, and communication, an ecosystem in which intelligence was distributed across multiple entities and technologies, functioning in real time with an adaptability and foresight that human science could barely begin to analyze. Suddenly, without warning, a new heat signature appeared on the monitors, smaller, faster, almost darting in motion, moving along erratic but deliberate trajectories that intertwined with the bear and the craft, suggesting reconnaissance or testing behavior, and Lena recognized that this was the introduction of a new variable into an already complex system, a factor that could change the dynamic of the interaction in unpredictable ways. Marcus whispered that the anomaly resembled some form of advanced drone or autonomous organism, and Lena, eyes fixed on the screen, could only nod, realizing that their data was rapidly becoming evidence of an intelligence network bridging biological and technological domains in a manner humanity had never recorded. The canyon echoed with low, resonant growls from the larger bear, punctuated by high-pitched whistles and clicks from the smaller companions, forming a communication pattern that seemed deliberate and structured. The hovering craft pulsed in response, emitting infrared and electromagnetic signals that created visible distortions in the air, illuminating dust and rocks in shifting geometric patterns, as if projecting an unseen map or interface that guided the creature's movements and reinforced coordinated behavior, a visual language of energy, matter, and intent that Lena documented with frantic precision, aware that even minor lapses could result in missing critical elements of the interaction, elements that could illuminate the very nature of this hybrid intelligence system. As the day progressed, the complexity of the scenario deepened, environmental responses, rocks vibrating, shrubs bending in unusual ways, heat signatures appearing in patterns inconsistent with known atmospheric conditions, indicated that the canyon itself had become an active participant, modulated by the interaction between craft and creatures. Lena hypothesized that energy fields from the hovering object were subtly reshaping local microclimates and influencing biological behavior, a revelation that suggested both deliberate engineering and ecological integration, and she scribbled notes furiously, aware that this could represent an entirely new category of life and intelligence, one where technology and biology were inseparably intertwined, creating adaptive systems capable of learning, communicating, and manipulating their environment simultaneously. By late afternoon, the larger humanoid bear approached the state ridge, positioning itself in a vantage point overlooking the valley floor, while the smaller entities performed rapid, intricate maneuvers around it. Lena noticed a synchronized escalation in energy emissions from the hovering craft, pulses now occurring in rapid sequences, causing minor seismic vibrations detectable in their instruments, and she realized that the creatures were responding instantaneously, adjusting their positions and movements in harmony with the electromagnetic signals, a demonstration of real-time interaction and energy-based coordination so sophisticated that it defied all previous assumptions about cognition, perception, and cross-species communication. The tension escalated further when the introduction of another energy signature, small, concentrated, moving with astonishing speed and unpredictability, suggested an additional participant entering the environment, a factor whose origin and purpose were unknown, but whose interaction with the established network immediately altered the behavior of both the humanoid bear and the hovering craft. Lena felt a surge of both fear and awe, recognizing that they were no longer passive observers but participants in a living, reactive system, one that could potentially manipulate their environment, track their responses, and challenge their assumptions about observation and intervention. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the canyon in shades of deep purple and orange, the interaction intensified. The larger bear performed a series of complex movements, coordinating with its smaller counterparts in a pattern that resembled both defense and display, while the hovering craft emitted a spectrum of energy pulses, ranging from low-frequency hums that resonated through the canyon walls to sudden high-intensity bursts that lit the terrain in intermittent flashes. Lena and Marcus, both recording and analyzing the events, realized they were observing a convergence of species, technology, and environment functioning as an adaptive intelligence system, a network that blended organic and artificial cognition in real time, exhibiting responsiveness, strategy, and perhaps even experimental behavior aimed at testing the human's presence. The complexity became almost unbearable. The larger bear vocalized in a sequence that varied in pitch, duration, and cadence, seemingly instructing the smaller entities while responding to the energy pulses of the craft, each action integrated within a larger system of coordination, feedback, and anticipation, a living choreography that expanded beyond biological instinct into the realm of deliberate strategy and environmental manipulation, and Lena's mind raced with implications. If such intelligence existed, it could fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of life, consciousness, and the potential for hybridized systems across biological and technological domains. In the dead of night, Lena's instruments picked up fluctuations in electromagnetic fields corresponding precisely with the creature's movements and vocalizations. Visual overlays from the infrared cameras revealed subtle distortions in the canyon's terrain, as if energy was being projected into space in structured patterns, shaping both perception and behavior in a network of interaction that was almost symphonic in complexity, a combination of adaptation, signaling, and manipulation that suggested awareness, planning, and coordination across multiple entities and systems. As hours passed, Lena and Marcus documented every detail, knowing that these sequences, once analyzed, could reveal a previously unimagined model of intelligence, distributed, hybridized, capable of interacting with physical and electromagnetic environments simultaneously, and perhaps even testing the limits of human observation. The canyon, once silent and inert, had become an arena of intelligence, a network of responsive behavior, and a crucible in which the boundaries of biology, technology, and cognition blurred into an intricate, living system, pulsating with energy, sound, and movement. By the early morning hours, the larger humanoid bear performed what Lena interpreted as a culmination display, leaping across cliffs with unparalleled agility, pausing to issue coordinated calls to its smaller companions, who darted and maneuvered in intricate formations, while the hovering craft emitted a continuous stream of energy pulses that amplified and mirrored the creature's motions. The result was a visual and energetic symphony that defied categorization, a performance that was simultaneously adaptive, communicative, and demonstrative, leaving Lena and Marcus stunned at the depth of sophistication, precision, and intelligence they were witnessing. And as the sun's first rays lit the valley, casting long, fractured shadows across the canyon floor, Lena realized with awe and trepidation that their role had shifted permanently. They were witnesses to intelligence that operated at the intersection of biology and technology, intelligence capable of anticipating, responding to, and perhaps even experimenting with human presence, and every note, every recording, every observation was now a part of an unprecedented chronicle, a record that could alter scientific understanding forever, challenging humanity's most fundamental assumptions about life, cognition, and the universe itself. By mid-morning, the canyon had transformed into a surreal theater of synchronized phenomena, where the humanoid bear, its smaller companions, and the hovering craft enacted a choreography of energy, motion, and sound that challenged every preconception Lena Whitaker had ever held about intelligence, life, and the subtle interplay between biology and technology. As she monitored the infrared screens, every movement of the bear was mirrored, amplified, or complemented by the craft's energy pulses, forming a system of interaction so complex it seemed almost conscious, and Marcus Ortega, usually pragmatic and composed, could only mutter in awe as he recorded fluctuating heat signatures that traced a pattern of communication, coordination, and environmental manipulation unlike anything humanity had documented. The larger bear now moved with deliberate caution along a ridge that overlooked the valley floor, pausing intermittently to vocalize a series of low-frequency calls, each reverberating across the canyon in patterns that Lena hypothesized were both instructions and assessments, signaling to the smaller entities and possibly coordinating responses with the hovering craft above, whose pulses of infrared energy now formed intricate sequences, highlighting areas of interest and influencing the behaviors of its terrestrial counterparts with precision, a feedback loop of cognition and influence that seemed simultaneously organic and mechanical, biological and technological. The desert air itself began to react subtly, as if aware of the unfolding interaction. Temperature fluctuations caused small gusts of wind to spiral unpredictably, dust swirled in localized vortices, and minor tremors registered on the team's seismic sensors, all coinciding with moments when the bear or the smaller entities executed particularly deliberate maneuvers, or when the craft emitted concentrated bursts of electromagnetic energy, leading Lena to speculate that the canyon environment itself had become an integrated participant in the phenomenon, a responsive medium through which intelligence expressed, coordinated, and experimented with both natural and artificial elements. Hours passed in a tense rhythm of observation, data collection, and near-constant analysis. Lena and Marcus attempted to decode the sequences of movement, sound, and energy emission, yet each hypothesis seemed insufficient, collapsing under the weight of complexity, as if the entities were operating in a cognitive framework beyond human comprehension, orchestrating behavior across species and matter, manipulating their surroundings, and simultaneously responding to the observers themselves with an awareness that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Around midday, the humanoid bear executed a series of astonishingly precise leaps across ridges, landing with a force that sent minor dust clouds erupting along the canyon floor, while its smaller counterparts followed in intricate patterns, weaving around obstacles, pausing at predetermined points, and occasionally emitting sharp whistles that Lena's equipment captured as consistent energy pulses. The hovering craft responded instantly, pulsing in harmonized bursts, illuminating the terrain in shifting geometric patterns, and for a moment, Lena felt a deep, almost vertiginous understanding. They were witnessing a system of intelligence distributed across organic and technological agents, an emergent behavior that functioned as both performance and experiment, communication and adaptation, play and strategic interaction, a level of sophistication and integration humanity had never anticipated. Marcus pointed to a cluster of rapid, erratic movements detected along the ridge's edge, smaller heat signatures darting in unpredictable directions, and Lena realized these were additional participants, autonomous, perhaps scouting or testing components introduced into the network, whose presence altered the dynamics instantly. The larger bear adjusted its stance, smaller entities recalibrated their maneuvers, and the craft shifted its energy emissions to maintain harmony or influence, suggesting a capacity for multi-level coordination that was unprecedented, a triadic system of biological and technological intelligence operating in real time, adaptive, aware, and responsive to both environmental and observer inputs. By late afternoon, the intensity escalated further. The canyon walls reflected the pulses of the craft in a dazzling array of distorted thermal images. Dust clouds and sand swirled unpredictably as if conducting their own choreography, and vocalizations from the humanoid bear and its companions became more structured, forming sequences of tones, pitches, and rhythms that seemed to encode information, directions, or tests, while the craft's energy pulses resonated in response, producing visible interference patterns in the infrared spectrum, minor fluctuations in electromagnetic readings, and subtle, almost imperceptible vibrations in the rock formations, all of which Lena documented with feverish precision, aware that these patterns might contain the first tangible evidence of a form of intelligence operating simultaneously across biological, technological, and environmental substrates. Evening approached, the sun sinking behind jagged ridges and casting long shadows across the canyon floor, yet the activity showed no signs of waning. The humanoid bear leapt with astounding agility, pausing to emit resonant calls that coordinated with the smaller entity's rapid maneuvers, while the hovering craft maintained continuous energy modulation, a luminous and electromagnetic symphony of action, response, and adaptation that suggested planning, anticipation, and perhaps even testing of the observer's presence, as if Lena and Marcus were inadvertent participants in an intelligence experiment extending far beyond their comprehension. At one critical moment, the larger bear paused atop a steep cliff, raising its massive head toward the hovering craft, emitting a series of low-frequency growls punctuated by shrill whistles that Lena detected on infrared and auditory equipment, and the craft responded instantly with a rapid sequence of energy pulses, creating thermal distortions, flickering light patterns, and minor seismic effects that seemed designed to elicit further movement from the bear and its companions. The smaller entities reacted immediately, weaving intricate paths, coordinating jumps and pauses, and responding to subtle environmental cues that seemed manipulated by the craft's emissions, demonstrating a level of distributed intelligence and real-time adaptation that left Lena questioning the very limits of cognition. As night fell, the canyon erupted into an extraordinary display. Energy pulses from the craft illuminated swirling dust and rock formations in geometric arrays. The humanoid bear and smaller entities executed synchronized maneuvers that suggested both strategy and play, and Lena, scribbling notes furiously, began to theorize that this system was engaged in a higher-order learning process, testing, adapting, and interacting not only with one another but with their environment and the human observers, a form of intelligence that existed as a hybrid of biological perception, technological mediation, and environmental integration, a network capable of dynamic adaptation in ways that challenged conventional understanding of life itself. The tension escalated further when a third, previously unseen energy signature appeared, moving rapidly across the canyon floor, weaving between the larger bear and its smaller counterparts, introducing a new variable whose purpose remained inscrutable. The humanoid bear immediately adjusted its movements, the smaller entities responded with heightened precision, and the craft emitted complex sequences of energy pulses, almost as if orchestrating a negotiation or calibration among participants. A demonstration of coordination, adaptation, and cognitive flexibility that Lena struggled to fully comprehend, knowing that they were observing intelligence manifesting across multiple layers of interaction, species, and technological mediums simultaneously. As midnight approached, the canyon became a symphony of movement, energy, and sound. The larger bear performed sweeping leaps and vocalizations that seemed to encode information. The smaller entities executed rapid, precise maneuvers that complemented and responded to both the bear and the craft, and the hovering object pulsed in intricate sequences, shaping thermal and electromagnetic patterns that influenced the behaviors of all participants and manipulated subtle environmental factors, creating a dynamic, living system that operated at the intersection of biology, technology, and consciousness, a system that appeared aware, adaptive, and deliberate in ways that defied every assumption Lena and Marcus had ever held. By the early hours of the next day, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm both observers, yet the canyon's activity continued unabated. Energy pulses, movement, and vocalizations created an emergent pattern that suggested iterative learning, strategic testing, and complex communication, while the humanoid bear and smaller entities coordinated with astonishing precision. And Lena realized with awe and trepidation that they had become witnesses to a hybrid intelligence system operating at levels beyond human comprehension, a convergence of organic and technological cognition in a living environment, and every note, every recording, every observation was now an essential piece of a record that could redefine understanding of life, intelligence, and the limits of human perception in the universe. The pre-dawn desert air carried a chilling stillness, punctuated only by the faint hum of the hovering craft and the low, resonant growls of the larger humanoid bear, whose presence now dominated the canyon with an almost mythical authority. Lena Whitaker, sleep-deprived yet impossibly alert, monitored the infrared feeds, noting that every subtle movement of the bear, every darting action of its smaller companions, and every pulse from the craft formed a complex web of interdependent behavior. An intelligence distributed across biological, technological, and environmental systems, adapting moment by moment to both natural variables and the observer's own presence, as if testing, teaching, or communicating in a medium beyond human comprehension. Marcus Ortega, equally entranced and unsettled, adjusted the thermal lens to capture the faintest heat signatures, revealing intricate patterns across the canyon floor, footprints, disturbed sand, shifting rocks, and fleeting traces of energy that seemed to pulse in synchrony with the craft's emissions, indicating a level of control and coordination that defied terrestrial explanations, a performance that suggested strategic cognition, anticipatory behavior, and an awareness of spatial and temporal dynamics far beyond known animal or technological capabilities. By mid-morning, the canyon's ecosystem had transformed into a theater of precise, synchronized phenomena. The humanoid bear moved with predatory grace, pausing at key vantage points, vocalizing in low, melodic sequences, while smaller entities responded in real time, weaving complex paths that intertwined with both the bear and the craft's energy pulses. And Lena realized that they were witnessing not random behavior but a deliberate, orchestrated system of communication, adaptation, and influence, a hybrid intelligence network operating seamlessly across multiple domains. Subtle environmental cues amplified the surreal nature of their observation. Localized gusts of wind, dust spirals, and minor seismic vibrations occurred in direct correlation with energy pulses from the craft and the creature's movements, suggesting that the canyon itself functioned as a responsive substrate for interaction, a medium in which energy, matter, and cognition converged. And Lena documented every anomaly with meticulous care, aware that these records might provide unprecedented evidence of intelligence distributed across biological, technological, and environmental systems. As the sun climbed higher, the intensity of activity escalated. The larger humanoid bear executed a series of deliberate maneuvers along ridges and cliffs, sometimes pausing to emit a coordinated sequence of vocalizations, while the smaller entities mirrored, complemented, or responded with intricate patterns, creating a dynamic interplay of movement and communication that seemed almost choreographed, yet spontaneous in its adaptation, a living experiment in intelligence, coordination, and Environmental modulation that blurred conventional boundaries between species, technology, and ecology. The hovering craft above continued to pulse in response, generating thermal distortions, electromagnetic anomalies, and visible fluctuations in infrared readings, forming a symbiotic relationship with the creatures below, influencing their behavior while simultaneously responding to their actions. A feedback loop of perception and adaptation so sophisticated it challenged the very limits of human comprehension. Lina noted with a mixture of awe and terror that this intelligence was distributed, multi-layered, and adaptive, capable of modifying the environment, coordinating across species, and reacting to observers in real time, suggesting a level of cognitive complexity that humanity had never documented or even imagined. By late afternoon, a new variable emerged, an additional energy signature, small, fast, and erratic, entered the canyon, weaving among the bear and its companions, introducing unpredictable dynamics that immediately altered the behavior of all participants. The humanoid bear shifted its stance, smaller entities adjusted their maneuvers, and the craft pulsed in complex, rapid sequences, orchestrating responses and recalibrating the system, a demonstration of distributed intelligence capable of integrating new information, adapting strategy, and maintaining cohesion across biological and technological agents, a process Lina and Marcus could only begin to document, never fully understand in real time. The canyon itself became an active participant, responding to energy emissions and movement with localized environmental effects. Dust clouds spiraled in complex vortices, rocks trembled subtly in rhythm with pulses, and temperature fluctuations coincided precisely with maneuvers by the creatures and craft, reinforcing Lina's conclusion that intelligence in this system extended beyond discrete agents into the very terrain, creating a hybrid network in which biology, technology, and environment operated as a unified, responsive organism, adaptive, anticipatory, and aware. Evening approached with an intensifying spectacle. The larger bear ascended a ridge, vocalizing in a resonant, melodic pattern, while the smaller entities executed rapid, darting maneuvers in precise alignment, and the hovering craft above pulsed energy sequences that modulated thermal and electromagnetic patterns across the canyon, creating a luminous ballet of movement, response, and environmental modulation, a coordinated symphony of intelligence manifesting simultaneously in multiple domains, challenging Lina's understanding of cognition, life, and the limits of adaptive systems. As darkness enveloped the valley, the interaction escalated further. Energy pulses from the craft created visible distortions, illuminating dust and sand in shifting geometric arrays, while the humanoid bear and smaller companions performed synchronized sequences that suggested experimentation, strategy, and communication. The introduction of a third, previously unseen energy signature further complicated the dynamics, prompting immediate adaptations from all participants, a live demonstration of anticipatory reasoning, problem-solving, and real-time coordination among hybrid agents, a phenomenon so complex it defied conventional models of intelligence. Midnight brought an extraordinary crescendo. The larger bear executed a series of high, precise leaps across cliffs, emitting structured vocalizations that coordinated with the smaller entities' intricate patterns, while the hovering craft emitted continuous pulses that resonated through the canyon, affecting the terrain, influencing behavior, and maintaining the cohesion of the system, forming a living network of intelligence that was both reactive and proactive, adaptive and experimental. Biological and technological in a synthesis humanity had never encountered. Exhaustion threatened to overtake Lina and Marcus, yet neither dared break focus. Every pulse, movement, and vocalization carried significance, evidence of a hybrid system of cognition, adaptation, and environmental modulation operating on scales and dimensions that defy human understanding. The canyon, once a silent expanse, had become a crucible of intelligence, a living, responsive arena in which observation itself became an element of the experiment, influencing outcomes, prompting adaptations, and revealing layers of sophistication that humanity was only beginning to glimpse. As the early morning hours arrived, residual thermal traces, minor environmental shifts, and complex vocalizations persisted, indicating continued activity even as visibility diminished. Lena, overwhelmed yet compelled, documented every aspect, recognizing that their presence had become intertwined with the phenomena, a subtle but inescapable element in a network of intelligence that spans species, technology, and environment, a system capable of learning, adapting, and interacting with consciousness beyond the confines of human perception, challenging every assumption about the nature of life, cognition, and the universe itself, and leaving both observers acutely aware that the proof they sought was no longer abstract but vividly, tangibly unfolding before them, demanding recognition, analysis, and understanding at levels that would forever alter human comprehension of the natural and technological world. The desert night stretched endlessly, a velvet expanse pierced only by the faint glimmer of distant stars and the intermittent pulses of energy from the hovering craft, whose presence had by now become a constant, almost living element within the canyon, shaping behavior, influencing movement, and dictating the flow of activity between the humanoid bear and its smaller companions. Lena Whitaker sat hunched over her array of infrared monitors, the exhaustion of sleepless nights etched deeply into her features, yet her focus remained absolute, because each subtle fluctuation in thermal signature, each shift in energy emission, and every unexpected maneuver had become critical evidence of an intelligence that operated simultaneously across biological, technological, and environmental systems, a distributed network of cognition, adaptation, and communication so complex it seemed to transcend known laws of life and physics. Marcus Ortega, equally alert, adjusted the lenses and recalibrated the sensors to capture every faint anomaly, small, rapid movements across rocky outcrops, minute energy pulses visible only in the infrared spectrum, and subtle electromagnetic variations that seemed to correspond with the larger bear's vocalizations, creating a symphony of interaction that indicated deliberate communication, coordination, and possibly even problem-solving, a depth of cognitive sophistication that neither had anticipated and that now demanded careful, continuous documentation. By mid-morning, patterns emerged in the movements and interactions of the humanoid bear and its smaller companions, revealing sequences that suggested ritualized behavior, environmental manipulation, and complex social coordination, all synchronized with the hovering craft's energy pulses, which acted as both guide and participant in the evolving system. Lena's mind raced as she attempted to decode the intricate choreography, realizing that each observation could provide insights into a form of intelligence that integrated sensory perception, motor coordination, and energy modulation in a manner previously unseen, creating a hybrid system in which the boundaries between organism, technology, and environment dissolved. The canyon itself seemed to respond to these interactions. Dust swirled in precise patterns, rocks shifted subtly under the influence of energy emissions, and minor temperature fluctuations correlated directly with the timing of the creature's movements and the craft's pulsing, suggesting that the very terrain had become a medium for interaction, a living canvas upon which intelligence expressed itself across multiple dimensions. Lena documented every anomaly with obsessive attention, knowing that this was no ordinary observation, but a window into a system of distributed cognition, one that challenged the very definitions of life, intelligence, and environmental agency. Afternoon brought further complexity. The larger humanoid bear ascended a ridge with predatory grace, pausing to emit resonant vocalizations, while smaller companions executed rapid, intricate maneuvers, their movements choreographed with precision yet adaptive in real time, responding to the craft's energy pulses, subtle environmental changes, and perhaps even to the presence of Lena and Marcus themselves. The craft, hovering above, emitted sequences of light and heat that influenced the terrain, reinforced behavioral patterns, and maintained synchronization across all participants, forming an adaptive, dynamic system in which intelligence operated simultaneously in multiple substrates and through multiple modes of interaction. At one point, a new, faster energy signature entered the canyon, darting unpredictably between the larger bear and its companions, immediately eliciting responses from all participants. The bear adjusted its stance, smaller entities maneuvered to accommodate, and the craft recalibrated its pulses, demonstrating a real-time capacity for environmental monitoring, threat assessment, and strategic adaptation, a sophisticated network of intelligence that integrated observation, prediction, and coordinated response in ways that Lina could scarcely comprehend, yet knew were critical to understanding the scope of this phenomenon. As evening approached, the canyon erupted into a coordinated display of movement, energy, and sound. The larger bear executed sweeping leaps across cliffs and ridges, vocalizing in sequences that appeared to encode instructions or signals, while smaller entities followed in intricate, adaptive patterns, and the craft pulsed with energy that shaped thermal readings, induced minor vibrations, and created visible distortions in dust and air currents, forming a triadic system of interaction that functioned as an emergent intelligence, distributed, responsive, and adaptive, operating beyond human sensory perception yet measurable through the instruments Lina and Marcus had painstakingly deployed. Nightfall brought an escalation in intensity. Energy pulses from the craft became more frequent and complex, interacting with the vocalizations and movements of the humanoid bear and smaller entities to produce coordinated sequences of behavior that suggested experimentation, environmental manipulation, and strategic planning. Subtle variations in the terrain, dust clouds swirling, rocks vibrating, and minor electromagnetic shifts reinforced the impression that the canyon itself had become an integrated element of this system, responsive to both the biological and technological agents within it, a medium of intelligence capable of shaping and modulating the actions of its participants. By midnight, the humanoid bear and its companions had developed a sophisticated rhythm with the craft's pulses, engaging in sequences that resembled both communication and problem-solving, while the newly introduced energy signature continued to test the network, prompting adaptive responses, recalibration, and strategic repositioning across all agents. Lina's notes filled rapidly with descriptions, sketches, and hypotheses, though she recognized that human language and conventional scientific frameworks were inadequate to fully convey the depth and nuance of what they were observing. A network of distributed cognition functioning across species, technology, and environment, alive, adaptive, and self-organizing in ways that transcended familiar models of intelligence. Early morning brought a new revelation. The larger bear performed a series of deliberate leaps and pauses, vocalizing in structured sequences, while smaller entities executed complex, complementary maneuvers, all in precise synchronization with the craft's energy pulses. The resulting interaction generated subtle environmental effects, localized shifts in temperature, minor dust spirals, and faint vibrations in rocks, that suggested a capacity for environmental modulation and coordination beyond conventional biology, a hybrid intelligence system capable of observing, influencing, and adapting simultaneously across multiple layers of existence. Lina and Marcus, though exhausted, could not tear themselves from observation, knowing that every detail, movement, pulse, vibration, vocalization, constituted critical evidence of a phenomenon that might redefine human understanding of intelligence, cognition, and life itself. The canyon, once silent and inert, had become a theater of adaptive, responsive systems, where biology, technology, and environment merged into a unified, conscious network, capable of anticipating, interacting with, and perhaps even teaching the human observers present, a realization that was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. As dawn approached, the humanoid bear and its companions engaged in what appeared to be a culminating display of coordination, leaps, vocalizations, rapid maneuvers, and synchronized energy responses from the craft created a dynamic, multi-layered tableau of intelligence, adaptation, and environmental modulation. Lena's pulse raced as she recorded every detail, understanding that this system operated not merely in real time but across interdependent dimensions, integrating perception, movement, communication, and environmental influence, a living, self-organizing network of intelligence whose implications could challenge every assumption humanity had ever held about life, consciousness, and the potential for hybridized systems of cognition across biological and technological domains. By mid-morning, residual activity persisted, with the humanoid bear, smaller entities, and craft continuing subtle, precise interactions that suggested iterative learning, testing, and adaptation. The canyon itself maintained minor environmental shifts, dust spirals, and thermal anomalies that reflected the ongoing presence of a distributed intelligence, responsive, adaptive, and aware, a living network that extended across species, technology, and terrain, and Lena realized with both awe and apprehension that their observations were part of an unprecedented chronicle, a record of hybrid intelligence in action, whose significance might forever alter humanity's understanding of the universe, the nature of life, and the limits of perception. The canyon, bathed in the pale light of dawn, seemed almost alive with anticipation, as if the very rocks and sand were aware of the ongoing intelligence experiment unfolding within their confines. Lena Whitaker, still exhausted from nights of relentless observation, adjusted the thermal scanners, noting subtle shifts in the energy fields of the hovering craft and the humanoid bear, whose presence now dominated the valley with a primal, commanding force, a silent authority punctuated by low-frequency growls that vibrated through the canyon walls, resonating in patterns that Marcus Ortega meticulously tracked, and for the first time, both observers realized that the canyon itself might be a medium of interaction, an active participant in the distribution of intelligence that spanned the biological and technological entities before them. The larger humanoid bear moved along a jagged ridge with deliberate precision, pausing intermittently to emit structured vocalizations, sequences of growls and whistles that Lena hypothesized served as instructions or assessments for its smaller companions. These entities, in turn, responded with intricate, adaptive maneuvers, weaving through rock formations, adjusting their positions, and occasionally leaping across unexpected gaps, all in perfect harmony with the rhythmic pulses of the craft above, which emitted sequences of infrared and electromagnetic energy that shaped the terrain, influenced the creature's behavior, and maintained cohesion across the hybrid network, a feedback loop of cognition and adaptation that left both humans stunned and exhilarated. As the morning progressed, the complexity of interactions intensified, a new, smaller energy signature appeared, darting unpredictably between the larger bear and its companions, introducing a variable that immediately prompted recalibration across the system. The larger bear adjusted its stance, the smaller entities modified their maneuvers with astonishing responsiveness, and the craft emitted rapid sequences of energy pulses that influenced both movement and environmental conditions, reinforcing the idea that this was a multi-layered system of distributed intelligence, capable of real-time problem-solving, environmental manipulation, and adaptive coordination across agents and terrain alike. Dust swirled in precise spirals along the canyon floor, seemingly guided by the energy pulses and the coordinated movements of the creatures, while minor vibrations and temperature fluctuations aligned perfectly with sequences of action, suggesting that the canyon itself functioned as a substrate for the transmission and modulation of intelligence, a living medium in which energy, movement, and perception converged to form a coherent, adaptive system, a network that challenged every assumption Lena and Marcus had about cognition, life, and the potential for hybridized systems of intelligence. By late afternoon, the larger humanoid bear ascended a prominent ridge, vocalizing in a resonant, deliberate pattern, while smaller entities executed complex, complementary maneuvers, and the hovering craft responded in near-instantaneous synchronization, emitting energy sequences that created visible distortions in air, dust, and thermal readings, shaping the canyon environment and coordinating the network's behavior in a manner that was simultaneously adaptive, anticipatory, and experimental. As if the system itself were aware of its observers and adjusting accordingly. As night approached, the canyon erupted into a dramatic interplay of light, movement, and sound. The larger bear leapt across cliffs, pausing to emit structured vocalizations, while smaller companions maneuvered in rapid, precise patterns, their behavior coordinated with the energy pulses of the craft, which in turn manipulated localized thermal and electromagnetic conditions, creating an emergent intelligence system that was dynamic, adaptive, and fully integrated across multiple domains, a phenomenon that transcended conventional biological, technological, or environmental explanations. Around midnight, an escalation occurred. The previously unseen energy signature intensified, darting faster, changing trajectory unpredictably, prompting immediate responses from all agents. The humanoid bear adjusted stance and vocalizations, smaller entities executed intricate adaptive maneuvers, and the craft responded with bursts of energy, shaping both environment and behavior, demonstrating a system of distributed intelligence capable of assimilating new variables, recalibrating strategies, and maintaining cohesion in real time, a living network whose sophistication exceeded human comprehension and challenged every established framework for understanding cognition and coordination. Throughout the night, Lena meticulously documented every pulse, movement, and environmental anomaly, aware that the hybrid system of intelligence she observed was not merely reactive but possibly experimental, testing boundaries, probing perception, and engaging with human observers in a subtle, almost imperceptible dialogue. The canyon itself responded to the distributed network with microvibrations, dust spirals, and minor thermal shifts, reinforcing the notion that this was an intelligence network that operated across species, technology, and terrain, seamlessly integrating all layers of observation, interaction, and adaptation into a single, coherent, living system. By early morning, residual energy signatures revealed continued activity. The larger bear performed sweeping leaps and deliberate pauses, vocalizing in rhythmic sequences, while smaller entities executed precise, adaptive maneuvers, all in harmony with the craft's complex energy pulses, environmental effects, dust spirals, minor tremors, and localized heating, further underscored the system's ability to manipulate terrain and coordinate across multiple substrates, forming a hybrid intelligence network of unprecedented sophistication, a convergence of cognition, perception, and environmental modulation that challenged the very definition of life. The observers, exhausted yet unable to withdraw, witnessed what seemed to be a culminating display, coordinated maneuvers across the canyon, synchronized energy pulses from the craft, and structured vocalizations from the bear, integrated seamlessly with the smaller entities' responses, forming a multi-layered tableau of intelligence, adaptation, and environmental influence. Lena, overwhelmed yet exhilarated, realized that this was not merely observation but participation, that their presence influenced the behavior of the network, and that the data recorded in this window of interaction represented a paradigm-shifting chronicle of hybridized cognition, distributed intelligence, and environmental integration. As daylight broke, painting the canyon walls in hues of gold and crimson, the larger bear and its companions gradually retreated, moving with deliberate caution, while the hovering craft slowly ascended, emitting soft pulses of energy that seemed almost like a farewell or acknowledgement. Lena and Marcus, drained but electrified with understanding, documented the final sequences, aware that they had captured evidence of an intelligence system operating across species, technology, and environment in ways humanity had never before imagined, and that the implications for science, philosophy, and the understanding of consciousness were both staggering and profoundly unsettling. By mid-morning, the canyon returned to a deceptive calm, residual thermal signatures fading, dust settling, and only faint vibrations in the rocks hinting at the extraordinary interactions that had occurred. Lena, staring at the monitors, realized that the proof they sought was no longer abstract but concrete, a living demonstration of distributed, hybridized intelligence, capable of communication, environmental manipulation, and adaptive coordination across domains, a phenomenon that demanded recognition, analysis, and perhaps even caution, because the canyon and its inhabitants now represented a level of cognition, power, and integration far beyond anything previously encountered by humanity. By mid-afternoon, the Nevada desert appeared deceptively tranquil, yet Lena Whitaker and Marcus Ortega knew better than to trust appearances. The canyon, still reeling from the previous night's extraordinary activity, vibrated with subtle traces of residual energy, faint thermal anomalies, and minor electromagnetic fluctuations, evidence that the humanoid bear, its smaller companions, and the hovering craft had not fully departed but remained in some capacity, observing, monitoring, or perhaps conducting further experiments on their human witnesses. Lena meticulously adjusted the infrared equipment, tracking the residual heat signatures, attempting to decode the faint pulses that still radiated across the canyon walls, and realized that even the smallest anomalies, the fleeting movement of dust, a subtle vibration in rock, or the flicker of thermal energy, could contain critical information about the distributed intelligence system she was now documenting, a hybrid network of cognition operating simultaneously across biological, technological, and environmental substrates. The larger humanoid bear, previously a dominant and solitary figure, now appeared in the far distance, moving along the ridge with a deliberate grace that spoke of awareness, strategy, and possibly reconnaissance. Smaller entities darted around, weaving in and out of shadows, executing maneuvers that suggested both coordination and adaptive improvisation, while the hovering craft above emitted soft but precise pulses, illuminating subtle features of the terrain, maintaining synchronization with the bear's movements, and reinforcing the network's intricate coordination, a level of hybrid intelligence that Lena and Marcus had never witnessed and that challenged every assumption they had about cognition and life. As the afternoon deepened, new anomalies appeared, small, rapid energy signatures darting unpredictably across the canyon, introducing variables that the bear and its companions adapted to immediately, demonstrating problem-solving, anticipatory adjustment, and real-time communication across agents and environment. Lena's notes became increasingly complex, filled with sketches, hypotheses, and cross-reference data streams, though she recognized that language and conventional scientific paradigms were wholly inadequate to convey the sophistication, depth, and integrated nature of the system before her. Environmental effects were equally astonishing. Dust spiraled into precise, unexpected vortices, rocks trembled in sync with energy pulses, and subtle heat gradients shifted along the canyon floor and walls, all in correlation with movements, vocalizations, and energy emissions of the bear, its smaller companions, and the hovering craft, indicating that the canyon itself had become a living participant in the intelligence network, capable of responding, influencing, and perhaps even guiding the behavior of its biological and technological agents. By late afternoon, Lena and Marcus observed sequences of coordinated action that were almost ritualistic in their execution. The larger bear leapt across cliffs with astounding precision, pausing to emit structured, resonant vocalizations, while smaller companions executed intricate, complementary maneuvers, and the hovering craft pulsed energy sequences that modulated thermal and electromagnetic conditions, shaping the environment and influencing the network's adaptive responses, creating a multi-layered system of intelligence that functioned as both biological organism and technological entity, fully integrated with its surroundings. Nightfall brought a crescendo of activity. The humanoid bear vocalized in complex, patterned sequences, smaller entities responded with rapid, adaptive movements, and the hovering craft emitted synchronized energy pulses that affected the terrain, producing visible distortions, thermal fluctuations, and minor vibrations. The interaction was both adaptive and experimental, demonstrating anticipatory behavior, real-time problem solving, and a sophisticated understanding of spatial, temporal, and energetic dynamics that far exceeded known animal or artificial intelligence capabilities. Around midnight, a new energy signature appeared, fast and erratic, weaving between agents and introducing unpredictable variables into the system, prompting immediate recalibration by all participants. The bear adjusted movements and vocalizations, smaller entities executed adaptive maneuvers, and the craft modified its energy emissions, maintaining harmony across the network while integrating the new factor, a live demonstration of distributed, hybrid intelligence capable of assimilating new inputs, coordinating across multiple domains, and sustaining system cohesion under dynamic conditions. The canyon itself seemed alive, localized dust swirls, minor seismic tremors, and temperature gradients reflected the hybrid network's influence, suggesting a substrate of environmental participation that enabled communication, coordination, and strategic modulation beyond the capabilities of discrete biological or technological agents, reinforcing Lina's understanding that the intelligence system they observe extended beyond its individual components into the very terrain itself, forming a unified, self-organizing network of cognition. Early morning brought a staggering display of synchronization. The larger bear performed deliberate sequences of leaps, pauses, and vocalizations. The smaller entities executed precise maneuvers, and the hovering craft emitted rapid sequences of energy pulses that modulated both environment and agent behavior, creating a dynamic tableau of intelligence, adaptation, and environmental integration. Lina, despite fatigue, recorded every movement, pulse, and anomaly, aware that their observations represented unprecedented evidence of a distributed, hybrid cognitive network operating across species, technology, and terrain. As dawn broke, painting the canyon walls in gold and crimson, residual energy patterns suggested ongoing interaction. The humanoid bear, smaller entities, and hovering craft continued subtle movements, vocalizations, and energy emissions, maintaining a level of coordination, adaptation, and environmental modulation that indicated continuous learning, testing, and problem-solving within the network. Lina realized with awe and trepidation that their presence as observers was an element in the system itself, influencing responses, shaping behavior, and participating in a hybrid intelligence experiment of staggering sophistication. By mid-morning, the larger bear and its companions gradually withdrew, moving with deliberate caution, while the hovering craft ascended slowly, emitting soft pulses of energy that seemed almost like acknowledgement or communication directed toward the human witnesses. Lina and Marcus, drained but exhilarated, documented every sequence, fully aware that they had captured evidence of an intelligence system operating simultaneously across biological, technological, and environmental domains. Adaptive, responsive, and capable of manipulating, coordinating, and integrating across multiple layers of existence. As the canyon returned to deceptive calm, residual thermal traces, minor vibrations, and faint energy anomalies hinted at ongoing, albeit subdued, activity, and Lina understood that what they had observed was not a singular event but an ongoing, distributed intelligence operating on scales and dimensions far beyond human comprehension, a living network whose implications for science, consciousness, and the understanding of life were profound, and whose existence would forever challenge every assumption humanity had held about the nature of intelligence, adaptation, and hybridized systems in the universe. The morning sun cast long, jagged shadows across the canyon floor, illuminating subtle traces of activity from the previous night, yet Lina Whitaker and Marcus Ortega sensed immediately that the canyon's silence was only superficial, a fragile veil over the continued presence of the hybrid intelligence network that had unfolded before them. Lina adjusted the infrared equipment with painstaking care, noting residual thermal signatures, slight vibrations in rocks, and faint electromagnetic fluctuations that persisted, evidence that the humanoid bear, its smaller companions, and the hovering craft remain connected to the environment, observing, testing, and perhaps analyzing the humans themselves, their very presence now a variable in a system of intelligence that had revealed capabilities far beyond anything previously documented. By mid-morning, the larger humanoid bear appeared atop a distant ridge, moving with deliberate grace, its low-frequency vocalizations reverberating through the canyon walls, harmonizing with the precise, rapid movements of smaller companions, and synchronized with soft but intricate energy pulses emitted by the hovering craft, forming a triadic system of coordination, adaptation, and environmental modulation that Lena and Marcus struggled to comprehend, aware that each motion, pulse, and sound might carry data, instructions, or experimental probes directed toward both the environment and the human observers. The canyon itself became an active participant in the intelligence network. Dust spirals formed in precise geometries, rocks vibrated subtly in synchrony with energy pulses, and localized temperature shifts aligned with the movements of the bear and its companions, reinforcing the notion that the terrain functioned as a responsive medium in which biological, technological, and environmental agents interacted seamlessly, forming a unified system of distributed cognition, adaptation, and communication that blurred conventional boundaries between organism, machine, and landscape. As afternoon deepened, new anomalies emerged. Small, erratic energy signatures darted unpredictably across the canyon, forcing immediate adjustments by the bear, its smaller companions, and the hovering craft. The bear shifted stance, vocalizations changed in pattern and frequency, and the smaller entities adapted their maneuvers in precise alignment with the craft's energy pulses, demonstrating an astonishing capacity for real-time problem-solving, strategic coordination, and integration. Across multiple domains, a living system that adapted continuously to both internal and external variables with a level of sophistication that Lena could barely process, much less categorize. The interplay between the humanoid bear and the craft intensified further. Synchronized energy emissions manipulated local environmental conditions, created temporary distortions in infrared and electromagnetic fields, and subtly influenced the behavior of the smaller entities, forming a complex network of causality and feedback that exemplified adaptive intelligence distributed across species, technology, and terrain, while also reflecting a profound awareness of their human observers, whose every action, note, and measurement appeared to be integrated into the network's ongoing experiment. By late afternoon, sequences of movement and energy modulation revealed patterns suggestive of iterative learning and environmental manipulation. The larger bear performed repeated leaps and pauses, vocalized in structured sequences that coordinated the smaller entities' maneuvers, while the hovering craft emitted high-frequency pulses that created visible thermal and electromagnetic effects on the canyon terrain, all in a synchronized system demonstrating anticipatory reasoning, distributed cognition, and adaptive feedback loops that left Lena and Marcus both exhilarated and awestruck, realizing that what they were witnessing was not merely observation but participation in an intelligence network operating across multiple dimensions of perception, action, and influence. Nightfall brought an unprecedented crescendo of activity. The larger bear vocalized in long, resonant sequences, executing calculated leaps across cliffs, while smaller entities followed complex, adaptive paths that interlace with the bear's trajectory and the hovering craft's rhythmic energy pulses. The canyon erupted in a dance of dust spirals, minor seismic vibrations, and visible thermal distortions, all of which reflected the network's dynamic adaptation, strategic coordination, and environmental influence, creating an integrated, multi-layered system of intelligence that surpassed conventional definitions of life and cognition, a living phenomenon operating simultaneously across biological, technological, and ecological domains. Around midnight, a sudden escalation occurred. A previously unseen, rapid energy signature darted across the canyon, introducing a new variable that immediately elicited adaptive responses from all agents. The larger bear adjusted its posture and vocalizations, smaller entities executed precisely coordinated maneuvers, and the craft responded with a complex sequence of energy emissions that influenced both movement and environment, a live demonstration of distributed intelligence capable of rapid learning, real-time problem-solving, and the maintenance of cohesion under dynamic, unpredictable conditions, illustrating a depth of cognitive and systemic integration previously unseen in terrestrial or artificial contexts. The canyon itself continued to respond, localized dust swirls intensified, subtle temperature gradients shifted, and minor vibrations in rock formations corresponded directly with energy pulses and movement patterns, suggesting that the hybrid network had effectively extended its operational domain into the environment, using it as both medium and participant in adaptive coordination, a living infrastructure that enabled communication, strategy, and learning to occur across biological, technological, and environmental layers simultaneously. By early morning, the larger humanoid bear, smaller companions, and hovering craft engaged in a coordinated display that seemed both ceremonial and experimental, sweeping maneuvers, synchronized vocalizations, and rhythmic energy emissions combined with environmental modulation to produce a multidimensional tableau of intelligence, adaptation, and influence. Lena, exhausted but compelled, documented every sequence, aware that the data they collected represented a historic record of hybrid intelligence functioning across species, technology, and terrain, an emergent system of cognition capable of learning, adapting, and interacting in real time with both its environment and human observers. As the first light of dawn broke over the canyon walls, residual thermal and electromagnetic traces suggested ongoing subtle activity, indicating that the network's adaptive processes continued even as visibility and motion diminished. Lena and Marcus, drained yet exhilarated, recognized that their role had shifted irrevocably. They were no longer passive witnesses but participants within a living, responsive system of intelligence, whose implications for the understanding of cognition, hybridized life, and environmental integration were profound and potentially paradigm-shifting, demanding both careful study and deep respect for the capabilities and awareness of the entities they had observed. By mid-morning, the canyon returned to a deceptive calm, dust settled, and residual energy emissions diminished, yet Lena could not shake the sense that the hybrid network remained, observing, integrating, and potentially interacting with their presence. The proof they had sought was no longer abstract or hypothetical, it was tangible, observable, and awe-inspiring, a living manifestation of distributed, adaptive, and hybridized intelligence that challenged the very foundations of human understanding and redefined the parameters of what life and cognition could encompass. The canyon's quiet morning belied the extraordinary intelligence network that had been unfolding for days, a complex system of coordination, adaptation, and environmental interaction that Lena Whitaker and Marcus Ortega had barely begun to comprehend. As they scanned the infrared monitors, subtle shifts in heat signatures, faint energy pulses, and minor vibrations in rock formations indicated that the humanoid bear, its smaller companions, and the hovering craft had maintained a persistent presence, observing, testing, and interacting with both the environment and the human observers, suggesting a level of awareness and strategic cognition far beyond anything humanity had documented. By mid-morning, the larger humanoid bear emerged from a shadowed ridge, moving with deliberate, predatory grace, its low-frequency vocalizations resonating across the canyon, coordinating precisely with the movements of smaller entities who executed intricate, adaptive maneuvers across the uneven terrain. Above them, the hovering craft pulsed with energy sequences that not only illuminated the landscape but also modulated environmental conditions, creating dust spirals, thermal gradients, and subtle electromagnetic disturbances that facilitated the network's seamless coordination, demonstrating a triadic system of hybrid intelligence that integrated biological, technological, and environmental agents into a unified, adaptive whole. As the day progressed, Lena and Marcus observed new variables entering the system, small, erratic energy signatures moved unpredictably across the canyon, prompting immediate adjustments from the bear, its companions, and the craft. Each agent responded with astonishing precision, adapting maneuvers, vocalizations, and energy emissions in real time, a live demonstration of distributed intelligence capable of assimilating new inputs, predicting outcomes, and maintaining network cohesion across multiple layers of interaction, a phenomenon that challenged every theoretical model of cognition, communication, and adaptive strategy previously conceived by human science. Environmental effects further amplified the canyon's role as a living participant in the network. Dust clouds formed precise, spiraling patterns, rocks vibrated subtly in alignment with energy pulses, and localized temperature gradients shifted with the coordinated movements of the hybrid agents, reinforcing the idea that the terrain itself functioned as a medium for intelligence, a responsive substrate capable of enhancing communication, coordination, and strategic adaptation, an ecological extension of the distributed cognitive network that Lena and Marcus were documenting with feverish attention. By late afternoon, the humanoid bear's maneuvers became increasingly complex, combining leaps, pauses, and vocalizations into sequences that appeared deliberate, purposeful, and adaptive. Smaller companions mirrored and complemented these movements with rapid, precise patterns, while the craft emitted high-frequency energy pulses that synchronized environmental modulation and reinforced coordination across agents, creating a multi-layered, self-organizing system of hybrid intelligence that seamlessly integrated biological, technological, and environmental inputs into a coherent, adaptive network. Nightfall brought an unprecedented escalation. The canyon erupted with synchronized activity, as vocalizations, energy emissions, and movement patterns converged into sequences that were at once experimental, communicative, and strategic. The larger bear executed precise maneuvers across cliffs and ridges, smaller entities darted in responsive arcs, and the hovering craft pulsed in rapid, intricate sequences that influenced terrain, behavior, and energy flow, forming a unified system of cognition that operated simultaneously across multiple domains, demonstrating distributed awareness, anticipatory adaptation, and real-time problem-solving at a scale previously unimaginable. Around midnight, a new, fast-moving energy signature appeared, darting unpredictably among the agents, introducing a variable that prompted immediate recalibration across the network. The humanoid bear adjusted its stance and vocalizations, smaller companions executed adaptive maneuvers, and the craft responded with complex energy sequences that influenced both movement and environmental conditions, illustrating a capacity for rapid learning, integration of novel factors, and maintenance of network stability under dynamic conditions, a demonstration of hybrid intelligence functioning at the intersection of biological, technological, and ecological domains. The canyon itself continued to reflect the system's influence. Dust spirals intensified in intricate geometries, minor tremors propagated along rock formations, and subtle thermal shifts aligned with the agent's coordinated activity, confirming that the terrain was not merely passive but an active participant in the network, a responsive substrate enabling distributed cognition, strategic adaptation, and environmental modulation, a living canvas through which hybrid intelligence could express, learn, and evolve. By early morning, sequences of activity suggested iterative learning and deliberate experimentation. The larger bear performed sweeping leaps and deliberate pauses, vocalizing in rhythmic, structured patterns, while smaller companions executed complementary, adaptive maneuvers, and the hovering craft emitted synchronized energy pulses that modulated both the environment and agent behavior, forming a multidimensional tableau of intelligence, communication, and environmental integration. A living, self-organizing network operating at a sophistication and scale that exceeded human comprehension. As dawn broke, residual energy emissions and subtle environmental shifts indicated continued interaction among agents. Even as visibility diminished, Lena and Marcus, fatigued but exhilarated, understood that their observations were not merely passive but participatory, their presence now an integrated variable within the hybrid intelligence network, whose adaptive processes, coordination, and problem-solving extended across species, technology, and terrain in ways that fundamentally challenged human assumptions about life, cognition, and environmental agency. By mid-morning, the humanoid bear, its smaller companions, and the hovering craft gradually withdrew, moving with deliberate caution while maintaining subtle signals and energy pulses that suggested ongoing monitoring, testing, and coordination. Lena and Marcus meticulously recorded every detail, aware that the hybrid system remained, and that the data they collected constituted irreplaceable evidence of intelligence distributed across biological, technological, and environmental domains. Adaptive, responsive, and capable of manipulating, coordinating, and integrating simultaneously across multiple layers of existence. The canyon returned to an almost deceptive calm, dust settling and residual energy patterns fading, yet the observers sensed that the hybrid network's influence persisted, subtle but undeniable, a testament to the system's capacity for persistence, adaptation, and continuous environmental engagement. Lena realized with profound awe and apprehension that what they had witnessed was not a singular event but an ongoing phenomenon, a distributed, hybrid intelligence functioning at a scale and sophistication that humanity had never before encountered, demanding both recognition and rigorous study, and challenging every preconceived notion of life, cognition, and the integration of biological, technological, and environmental systems. The canyon, now illuminated by the golden light of mid-morning, held an uncanny stillness, yet Lena Whitaker and Marcus Ortega knew that beneath the apparent calm, the hybrid intelligence network remained active, a persistent, distributed system of cognition, adaptation, and environmental interaction that had been unfolding for days, its presence palpable in every subtle thermal fluctuation, every minor vibration of rock, and every residual electromagnetic pulse detectable on their instruments. The humanoid bear, its smaller companions, and the hovering craft were no longer merely entities to observe, they had become an integrated phenomenon, a living system whose intelligence transcended conventional understanding, merging biological instinct, technological precision, and environmental responsiveness into a unified, self-organizing network. By late morning, Lena focused on decoding patterns that had emerged over the past several days. Sequences of movement, vocalization, and energy emission suggested not randomness but deliberate communication, strategic experimentation, and environmental manipulation. The larger bear performed calculated leaps across cliffs, emitting low-frequency vocalizations interspersed with higher-pitched whistles, while smaller companions executed complementary maneuvers, and the hovering craft pulsed. Complex sequences of energy that shaped dust, air currents, and thermal gradients, effectively orchestrating an interaction among agents and terrain that was simultaneously adaptive and anticipatory, a living experiment in cognition and coordination that transcended known limits of intelligence. Afternoon brought a sudden escalation, a new, erratic energy signature darted unpredictably through the canyon, weaving among the humanoid bear, smaller entities, and hovering craft, introducing variables that prompted immediate, synchronized responses. The bear adjusted posture and vocalizations, smaller companions executed adaptive, rapid maneuvers, and the craft responded with high-frequency pulses, influencing both agent behavior and environmental conditions, demonstrating a system capable of learning, integrating novel information, and maintaining cohesion across multiple layers of interaction, a real-time orchestration of hybrid intelligence that Lena and Marcus could document but scarcely comprehend in its full depth. Dust spirals, thermal anomalies, and minor seismic tremors intensify in correlation with energy pulses and agent movements, revealing that the canyon itself functioned as an integral component of the network, a responsive substrate through which intelligence propagated, adapted, and manifested. Lina realized that this was not a mere interaction of discrete biological and technological entities but a triadic system in which cognition, communication, and environmental modulation converged seamlessly, forming a self-organizing, adaptive intelligence network that extended beyond human perception and defied conventional scientific paradigms. By late afternoon, the larger bear had ascended a ridge and remained in a deliberate posture, vocalizing rhythmic sequences that coordinated with smaller companions, while the hovering craft emitted synchronized energy pulses that influenced environmental factors and maintained network coherence. The canyon responded dynamically, with dust vortices, temperature shifts, and electromagnetic fluctuations aligning perfectly with the agent's behaviors, illustrating a level of coordination, foresight, and environmental integration previously unseen. A living system of cognition operating simultaneously across species, technology, and terrain. As night approached, the canyon erupted into a spectacular interplay of light, movement, and sound. The humanoid bear executed precise leaps and vocalizations, smaller entities maneuvered with extraordinary adaptability, and the craft emitted complex sequences of energy pulses that modulated terrain, behavior, and environmental conditions, forming a unified network of distributed intelligence capable of anticipation, learning, and real-time problem-solving, a phenomenon that surpassed terrestrial or artificial analogues and redefined the boundaries of cognition, life, and environmental agency. Around midnight, the network introduced yet another variable, a fast-moving, unpredictable energy signature that traversed the canyon, prompting immediate adjustments from all agents. The bear altered stance and vocalization, smaller companions adapted their paths with uncanny precision, and the craft emitted responsive energy sequences, illustrating the system's capacity for integrating new information, maintaining cohesion, and coordinating responses across biological, technological, and environmental layers, a dynamic intelligence network functioning as a holistic, living entity. By early morning, sequences of synchronized activity suggested both experimental testing and ritualized communication. The larger bear performed deliberate, sweeping maneuvers while vocalizing in complex patterns. Smaller entities executed complementary adaptive motions, and the craft emitted energy pulses that manipulated environmental factors and reinforced coordination. The resulting tableau of intelligence, adaptation, and environmental modulation demonstrated a depth of cognition that challenged every known model of life, consciousness, and hybridized system interaction. As dawn broke, residual thermal and electromagnetic traces indicated ongoing subtle activity. The humanoid bear, smaller companions, and hovering craft maintained continuous, albeit subdued, coordination, suggesting iterative learning, environmental engagement, and adaptive response, a hybrid intelligence network operating persistently across multiple domains. Lina and Marcus, exhausted yet exhilarated, understood that their role as observers had become integrated into the system, influencing responses and participating indirectly in a living, responsive experiment of cognition and coordination on a scale previously unimaginable. By mid-morning, the larger bear and its companions began a slow, deliberate retreat, ascending ridges and disappearing from immediate view, while the hovering craft rose gradually, emitting soft pulses of energy that suggested recognition, acknowledgement, or ongoing monitoring, a subtle but powerful indication of continued presence and awareness. Lina and Marcus, their notebooks filled with observations, sketches, and hypotheses, recognized that the phenomenon they had documented was no longer hypothetical or anecdotal. It was real, tangible, and irreversibly altering human understanding of intelligence, adaptation, and environmental integration. The canyon returned to deceptive calm, dust settling and residual energy patterns fading, yet the hybrid network persisted invisibly, a living system of cognition, coordination, and environmental modulation, adaptive, responsive, and aware, a reminder that intelligence could exist simultaneously across species, technology, and terrain. integrated into a holistic, self-organizing entity whose existence demanded both recognition and respect, Lina understood that the evidence they had gathered represented a paradigm-shifting chronicle of distributed, hybridized intelligence, a living proof of cognitive systems that operated beyond human perception and challenged the very definitions of life, consciousness, and environmental agency. In the aftermath, as sunlight fully illuminated the canyon, Lina and Marcus reflected on the magnitude of their observations. The humanoid bear, its smaller companions, and the hovering craft had demonstrated coordinated movement, strategic adaptation, environmental modulation, iterative learning, and real-time problem-solving at levels of sophistication previously unseen, revealing a hybrid intelligence network that merged biological, technological, and environmental domains into a unified, self-organizing system. Every pulse, vocalization, leap, and environmental interaction had been a testament to a living, adaptive intelligence that challenged human understanding and demanded a re-evaluation of cognition, life, and the interplay between species, technology, and environment. By noon, the canyon lay quiet once more, yet Lina and Marcus felt the enduring presence of the network, subtle but unmistakable, a distributed intelligence that had irrevocably expanded the horizon of human knowledge. They knew that the proof was not only in the data recorded, the thermal anomalies, or the energy pulses documented, but in the profound realization that intelligence could exist, adapt, and operate across dimensions of biology, technology, and environment in ways humanity had never before imagined, leaving them both awestruck and forever changed by the undeniable, living proof of its existence.